It is not the right mic.
Ooh.
I'm not winning here. It's early in the morning and I'm already losing.
I don't think I can say that.
You're already live though, so we're okay. All right, so we're live. It's early, especially on the West Coast. You know, we're on the East Coast, obviously, so it's not as big of a deal for us. But if anybody's there, please chat and do the normal stuff and say hello, and maybe people come on later. In fact, I must have done you wrong. Yeah. Starting off with you when it's so dang early for
everybody. I got the early flight, so I got to get in and get out.
Oh, so it was you, not me.
Yeah, it's me.
Okay,
This is on me. This is on me.
Well, here's what the goal of today is for anybody watching, catching in. I'm just sitting down with a bunch of people I like and having some conversations. So, one of those people is John German Harden.
Yep.
That's your middle name now, just so you know.
I added it in there. It's the German Shepherds since the very beginning.
It did it. But, you and I had a conversation in passing yesterday that I wanted to talk about today. So one of the things that was talked about from CompTIA was the need for industry regulation of MSPs. You had somebody from CISA there, Abigail, and you had people talking about this need to go through Trustmark, which is amazing. Thank you so much, Raphael. Good seeing you. Good day, Abraham. It's nice to see you. Congrats on your ISC squared membership and your CISSP. So, we talked about how if everybody's going through regulation, which means MSPs are now going through some matriculation of regulation, compliance and governance and their own, controls. But as they try to meet those controls and try to answer how they meet those controls and all of those things, there's a gap.
Yep.
What's that gap? What are we seeing in that space?
Well, there's a lot of gaps. But
fair. But the one we talked about.
That's fair. That's fair. No, I know. I'm just messing around. No, the gap we talked about really is, MSPs and vendor selection. And the fact that, what's going on, Tim? Good to see you. The MSPs and the vendor selection in the sense that, you go out to one of these shows. So we're sitting here live at ITNation Secure, obviously.
Yep.
You go through the vendor poll. All the vendors have a solution for you. They're solving one problem or the other. They tell you their CIS, X, Y, Z, whatever it might end up being.
Sure.
And it's great. You're excited. You're energized to solve this problem for your customer. But what we talked about yesterday was putting a pause on that for a little bit and having a conversation with the vendor to understand, are they putting you more at risk accidentally by doing so?
Yeah. And what that makes is people start saying, hey, vendor A, vendor Z. I love that you brought in some Australian. We do have a good A, mate. So I'm assuming
it's from Canada. Good. I've been working it out with the Canadians.
No, it's okay. But I love that you brought that in, which means that thousands of MSPs are going to be asking their vendors for how secure are you, right? That's this gap aspect of it. Because I like to talk about my CIS mapping in lenses because I'm weird. Yep. But lens one is this understanding of how do you as a company, product, or service help me meet a safeguard, right? If you're Mail 9.5, got you, homie. We're implementing DMARC. I understand that you help meet that. And I think we're getting a pretty good handle on that part of it, to your point of seeing that in the trade show halls and such. But the second piece is, how do I know in our and Tim, you already Johnny foreshadowed this, you suck. But how do I know in my shared responsibility with you that you're doing your own due care? Mm-hmm. And so I like to think of that as lens two, which is this understanding that I need to know how your product, platform, or service is treated so that I can say I still meet my controls. So think of it this way. If I need to meet 5.6 or 6.7 for centralizing access control or centralizing accounts, then I need to have SSO. Well, if your platform meets 9.5 but doesn't sell me SSO potentially, then I might have a problem meeting my controls. And so I think that first lens two there is the one that will drive vendors crazy if it's not normalized. Well, right? You know what I mean?
It'll drive both people crazy.
Sure.
It'll drive the MSP crazy because the delays, if it's not normalized, because it's going to take time for
No, I still need this, and I actually need this because of that, right?
Yep. And it's going to drive the vendors wild because they're going to be answering the same question literally every single day.
In a little different way.
Hopefully, actually. I would rather have that, to be fair, a little bit. I'd rather
the same question would help, right? Because then you can normalize that on your own.
But I mean, I would be happy if the MSPs were asking these questions.
And they are starting to, but it's probably 3 1,000ths instead of anything higher than that.
But everybody gets energized to solve the problem, which, I mean, I'm a problem solver. I love it.
Me and you both.
But it's about slowing down. And I was talking yesterday to somebody, and we were talking a little bit about the what I call the pre-bake-off, right?
Sure.
Like if you've got a control you want to solve, what are the questions you need to even be asking before you vet them as a demo, just to save you effort, period. Like, don't even have a conversation.
Wait, you don't have SSO? I actually won't take on. And that was what I did at Iconic, right? With Matt Topper and Tony Miller and everyone was, we got to a point where in our SOC 2, we were not accepting anything that didn't have single sign-on, period. And so I hate pulling that same guitar string. But at that time, I used to say I had a lot of one-string guitars.
Yeah.
Right.
But that one's easy. That not easy, but that one's the one that makes sense. And if
It
that's
does.
what people hear and resonate with it, then we can push that further.
That's exactly my point.
So,
yeah, but and Tim says, we all love things. Don't just ask for a sock too. Even when you're talking about Brian Kane, come join the party, buddy. You're a little early,
there,
but
Brian.
You're always welcome. So have a seat.
Brian,
You're on
good to
camera.
see
Don't
you.
say anything ugly about me unless you mean it. But we were talking about shared responsibility with vendors, and you guys actually. What's funny about this Malwarebytes? The reason I wanted to talk with Brian is they literally crushed it. Right, I'm working on this lens mapping project where Lens 1, Lens 2. Lens 3, though, and we're going to get to Lens 1 and 2 with you a bit more, but with Lens 3 is this understanding of, Tim's point, just a SOC 2 is useless for me. It really only tells me whether or not you've done a little bit of effort to try to scope some information system down and write some policy, which is great. And it is a good thing if a vendor has done some of those things. But what I'm trying to get at is really, really solving 15. Which is this supply chain risk, this understanding of vendor management and, third-party risk management, TPRM, all the new terms that are coming from that in the SMB and MSP space. And as you think about that, we're trying to figure out this piece of how secure are you actually? Like, do you have an EDR? Yeah. But are you actually monitoring it? Do you actually have somebody that's doing that work? Do you actually have somebody that knows what they're doing? Do you have a SOC? And it's these things, and they all align back to CIS.
Yep.
Right? If you look at NIST 800, 171, 171A has some space there, and CIS is kind of the what for that. You could see that as we go through this trust mark with the partners, the MSPs, the providers, there's some need that those third parties have some of that same requirement upon them, and it has to be delivered in my mind the same way, right? To make this scalable.
And that's where somebody in the channel, somebody in the community needs to kind of help step up, right? Like there's a need right there. One string west. There's a need though to have the same unified answers, right? What do we have here? What is
no
Tim
Timothy
saying?
Golden?
Oh goodness,
no sir, we cannot. That's not the target today.
We can't all be Tim.
Well, but even if we had that conversation, joking all aside, going FedRAMP high would not scale enough today. And I think it's probably overkill for a lot of that space. But I love where your heart is, Tim. We can have that conversation, you and I, and sit down and talk about it. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. And, of course, James, always great to see you. If you guys don't know, James McQuiggan is just amazing. He's at KnowBe4, but really is an author of many books around MFA and all kinds of stuff. Just great human being in general. So good seeing you, man. Okay, so back to this point. I want to hear your thoughts on this. How do we solve it?
So
talk about the problem.
We know the problem, right? So we as vendors are working with hundreds of customers every day, every week, and we want our vendors to be asking these questions. But we need somebody in the community to really call out and build a verified list of whatever it's business questions, security questions, operation questions, a questionnaire that is published and available so that we can share it with our customers and it's uniform. So when I ask, if I ask Malwarebytes, what is your this guy? Yeah, we just met.
Sorry about that.
I'm surprised we've never met before, but
yeah, fair enough.
If I ask you a series of questions, it should be pretty easy for you to deliver the same payload back to me. Yep. That way, when I'm looking at things, I'm looking at all things equal because we all know.
Well, and let's take it a step further. What if there was some third party? Let's call them RompTIA.
Maybe.
Let's say there was somebody like RompTIA that could, in some ways, wall something like that behind their world.
Like a RompTIA member.
You could have something like that, yeah. Where now instead of the vendor having to actually do that transaction, automated or otherwise, maybe that comes under this understanding of vendors participating in their own type of trust mark. It was alluded to in the presentation yesterday, and partners having their trust mark, and now you have them all going through the same thing. You have them all going through the same understanding. They now have similar answers to questions, and the answer really is, here's that answer. Oh God, Tim. Michael Riggs, why would you say SIG-Lite out loud? Like I almost threw up in my mouth just a smidge, man. That's not cool. But fair. It is effective as all get out. But, and Michael is going to come on and talk with me about some really cool stuff, I think, in this same vein. We might end up being quite thematic, and I hadn't intended it. But what about this fictitious company in the middle solving that? Would that make it easier for all involved if you had one set of standards, everybody follows it from that perspective, and we have that kind of trust partnership already held from how we transfer these things we need? for proof.
I think it should work, right? Like in theory, I would be happy delivering the same payload every time in a sales conversation. And quite frankly, like that would probably be part of my pre-sales cycle anyway. Here's my, go on to RompTia's portal and access this document. You have the answers you need so that my sales cycles actually go quicker as a vendor. But the big key thing here is if we do something like that, there's going to be some areas, right? Like things are going to change. So we need to make sure this artificial company keeps up to date with those questions. And we need to make sure that they're not exposing too much to a degree, right? Like we want to be confident in what we're sharing, but we don't want to overshare. But I do like the idea of uniform answers because we all know what happens when you give a salesperson the opportunity to direct the conversation.
Oh yeah. We're Segis. Man, we're Segis. We're Segis. We've been crushing Segis for years. Yeah, bro. Like killing it.
Yeah, Segis.
CMMC, I'm already totally certified. Yeah. It's totally done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've gotten 12 of them.
Actually.
I've collected 12 of them. I don't know, a 111 SPRS score. So.
I'm at 12. So we're good.
That's fair. That's fair. But I digress. You're right. Like salespeople, not to derail, absolutely are trying to do one thing, which is accomplish their sales goal, and that's their mission.
Security officers,
and they're not able.
Officers. That's not their job. So I think it would help them a lot. Yeah, it would help the internal IT teams at those companies a lot too.
I love that Tim goes cough cough SRO, and he's 100% right. That's where I'm going with it in my mind. I think that to your point of it's always changing. Mm-hmm. You have this challenge of how do other industries deal with that? Well, PCI DSS said, let's form a compliance commission where, definitely use both those words wrong. Probably just triggered a few people in the audience. But the point is we're gonna get together as an industry and come up with what are the standards. Now, you would argue that PCI was crap. But if you remember, PCI was one of the first tough nuggets to crack. It was the first time somebody said, sorry, your firewall SSL is not okay. You need to fix it. Oh, fine. And people would do the excluding so they wouldn't show up, right? Like, Jesus, man. But you look at it, and now if you look at some of the new revisions that are coming with PCI, it's actually getting pretty stringent. There's some really good meat in there, and there's some really good stuff happening there. So I feel like that's what we need to form here. And that's what CompTIA kicked out on stage yesterday. It's what they're going to be doing all about at ChannelCon, is talking about MSPs regulating by themselves taking through that process of getting healthier on their own capabilities.
Yeah. And, we might have something at ChannelCon. There might be a track. I think it might be called How to Select Your Vendor.
Something like that.
I think it might be talking about something like that.
This guy is? Yeah.
Something about how to talk about it.
A little self-plug's okay. I'm always good with it. But you should be there. If you're not coming to ChannelCon, well, I feel like this is going to be actually a seminal year. Yeah. Because of the density and mass of, I think there's 540 people on the wait list to go through. Yeah. Trustmark, but anyways, didn't mean to derail you.
No, but what we'll be talking about, it's not even hard stuff. It's really simple conversations that you can ask when you're having a pre-bake-off. I used that term earlier. I consider pre-bake-off to be before they've even vetted the vendor that they want to purchase, and then bake-offs, your selection of your few that you're after where you really want to get into deeper due diligence. But there's pre-bake-off questions, really simple things like, I'm going to ask this question for Tim, like, are you SOC 2?
Right. Yeah, because Tim knows SOC 2 is all the security you ever need.
I just want to mess with Tim. But no, are you SSO, the one string we guys struck? Like, there's about 15 questions we're actually going to put together there at that vendor due diligence. I know the Ecosystem Council we're working on is actually looking to put something out like this. Sure. So it should be pretty exciting. It should be a good talk. But if you don't have a vendor due diligence, I know Tim over here said he's got one he can share. Maybe reach out to Tim or come out to the ChannelCon talk or.
But I think the frustration though of this kind of escalatory people starting to do vendor due diligence is really just people not knowing what they're even asking. And it's almost like the blind leading the blind. And I don't mean that pejoratively to MSPs listening or watching right now. I just mean, even when I went through that first growth and understanding of compliance and security and the things that I was going through, like I was asking ignorant questions. Like I'll just straight up point that finger at myself. Yeah. And now I don't mean this negatively, but I'm going to say it. I'm seeing a lot of ignorant questions where MSPs just genuinely don't even know what they're asking. Yes. And so we're going to get into that, Brian. It sounds like that's a trigger for you right now. But I think what we need to do and what you're doing and trying to do at ChannelCon, what CompTIA is doing, what we're trying to do, RompTIA, right? This fictitious RompTIA we were talking about. Robot Overlord, some things, I don't know. But
the t-shirts will be
they'll be RompTIA. It'll be a romper, actually. It'll be a full romper. But the point is I think that standardizing that reduces that anger and also reduces some of that ignorance in the sense that they'll now have a standardized body of the questions that matter and what needs to be checked off on, and where there's something substandard based on that. Just first, kind of like you said, the entry point, that
The
small
pre-bake-off,
pre-bake-off questions, because those are the ones that if the answer is no, and I have a hard agreement that I'm going to do this, and if they don't have it, I'm not doing it with them. Why waste either of our time?
But that's the key thing right
Right?
there, right?
Like either of us. My client acquisition cost as a vendor shouldn't be higher because I met with people that aren't my qualified candidates.
Yep.
So,
and I'm saying though the vendors need to come to these kind of sessions too, right? Like
yeah.
It's always interesting. The vendors always kick back in their halls, but like jump into the sessions with these tracks, take these kind of dialogues away, prepare something so your sales team can get that in front of it.
Yeah. And I know you have a flight to catch, and I don't want to hold you too long, and you still have to pack. You've got 4 minutes left, and I'm going to ask you a question that I'm going to be asking on my panel for our kickoff at Beyond. So if you're watching this, please come to Beyond. If you haven't signed up, we're over 1,000 registrants. It's awesome. There are hundreds of humans that have put hundreds of thousands of man hours and woman hours into driving this conference. It's going to be awesome. But the one question I'm going to be asking, or one of the questions I'm going to be asking on the stage is, as you see your buyer shift from a less mature consumer to rapidly more mature consumer, what has to change in marketing in our world for that to make sense? And I'm going to be asking it a little differently when I do it on stage, but what has to change in our world?
Yes, so I think, I actually sit in the marketing side of the organization here at Alvic, but I think I'm an engineer by background.
Sure.
And I think where a lot of marketing is missing is actually that nice actual IT touch, right? You can't say that you're X, Y, Z, right, on your CIS controls unless you are. Somebody asked the other day, like, what controls aren't you? If you're going to just say you're everything at this point. So marketing needs to be able to cut through a little bit of the fluff, get straight to just bullet points of what they're bringing to the conversation.
Yeah, and technical brief data.
Technical
much more.
Data.
Here's the stuff you can do along this framework or that framework, whatever it may be that you choose to adhere to, NIST CSF or whatever it is. But
not a bunch of chat GPT words. We need right. Not a bunch of big marketing.
No offense, future robot overlord.
I'm so sorry, Tia. Is that what we've decided the future overlord's name?
I guess that's what we're doing. Rob T is our future overlord. So,
but provide technical stuff. Actually help the person on the other end, because even though you might be in your world thinking this makes sense and somebody's going to validate it and all that, remember there's a technician that's reading that white paper that's probably validating it for the company, and that technician doesn't want to hear about your superfluous, marvelous solution. They want to hear, how do you make my business better?
Yeah, what is that, square peg or round one? We're just going back to being kids, sitting over the little block thing with the star pounding on a circle.
Yep.
Right? Like that's the challenge here. We want to know real data. And I agree with you. I think that is the biggest difference, is that if you were pitching to a doctor, you wouldn't say, cures all cancer. Buy the hottest new one.
But
how's it do that? No, we don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that one.
Yeah. It would be very data driven, and obviously there's other employees that work in medical sales.
But it's very prescriptive. If we're going to stick with the medical terms.
Look at that. That's exactly what it is. It's quite prescriptive. Yeah. Here's the data. Here's what we do. Here's how we can help you. But it also, and we'll get into this with Brian here in a minute, and talk about how does it shape your product as a company when people are more mature. Right? How does that happen? And I have some ideas on that. But
I'll leave with one final comment. If people are focusing on like the actual controls that need solved and not just the exciting new feature or the new idea here or there, really align to what you're building to solve a problem. You miss it sometimes. I mean, I get it. I've been in the engineering seat. I've built things that are waste of resource and time, quite frankly. But like build something that's aligned to a problem. And I think if the vendors start pushing us, or not the vendors, if the MSPs start pushing the vendors around controls and the orientation around their controls and how it's solving it, it's really going to force vendors to build better tech. Honestly, I think in general, there's no bad outcome of this if Tia does it right.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, listen,
sorry, Tia.
Always great seeing you.
Cheers.
I love to hear about
pleasure to meet you.
Charity 5K maybe next time.
Charity 5K.
Well, maybe a little early to drop that.
If you know, you know.
Oh,
if
you don't.
Ask me or Brad Powell or Matt Topper or Matt Lee here soon.
Yeah, I won't
but
be
if you
running.
Don't know.
But just so you know, I'm not a runner. But
maybe.
I have a wallet.
5K's a distance, not a pace.
That's true. That's true.
5K's a distance, not a pace.
Good seeing you, brother. Thank you.
Cheers, Matt.
Yeah, man.
Hey, good luck on your show.
Thanks.
All right. I think everybody can hear us just fine. But Brian, why don't you scoot over here and introduce yourself just a skosh?
I'll get comfy with you.
So you are a recovering MSP.
I am.
Do you still do the meetings? I started skipping the meetings. I fell off the wagon a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
I still dip my fingers in a bit just because I like to still be in touch. I'm an engineer as well, and there's a control issue with that. So.
Yeah, I love the way you're moving your hands because it's the way I think about it too. It's a kinesthetic aspect of I just want to run stuff. I want to do the things. Hands on keyboard.
It's the. Do you remember the SNL skit with Jimmy Fallon, the IT guy? Like I want to move people out of their chairs, and I just want to take over the computer.
All right, brother. Well, listen, you're at Malwarebytes now. Again, back to that recovery aspect as an MSP. I'm having some fun focus issues. That's interesting. All right. Anyways, I digress. So one of the things that we did at PAX 8 is I have been mapping CIS, right, as a project. And this has been a passion project of mine for a few years. But mapping products on the line card to CIS in a fairly unique way in that lens one of, listen, I want exactly what he was just saying about how do you serve this? I need explanation, right? And all the way to here's what I do. Here's the things you need to do to be successful. Here's the things that this control I help solve, facilitate, or partially solve, right? And so when you went through that, as you watched that product stack there in front of you, because you guys were the ones this was the most evident on, just because you have SKUs that almost directly align to safeguards in the way they work. And that's probably a little Martin awesomeness in general, along with some amazing product managers. But one of the things that I noticed in yours is just the sheer spread of tabs for each product and how they serve different safeguards and controls. So I want to flip this around. If you were in product, trying to build product, how cool is it to see your product laid out against something measurable or somewhat pragmatic as a practitioner, right, for that use?
It's absolutely amazing. I think you hit on a keynote there too, which was the things that we can fully meet and the things that we partially meet.
Sure.
So we're truly measuring, hey, you know what? Maybe we're not quite here on this one, but we're almost. And then focusing on the spread of controls that we can truly affect within our tool set.
Yep.
No one has the Swiss Army knife.
Right.
No one does.
Yeah.
When people come out and say, install our tool, and it'll just take care of everything for you.
Right. Yeah.
This is
blocks all things, kills it
Yes.
all. Live from hotel room. Yeah.
Exactly.
Eric Taylor, that's not true. I am in a hotel room in the Gaylord at ITNation Secure, where there happened to be a lot of these humans that I wanted to sit down with but I didn't pay for the suite. I accidentally got the suite. They upgraded me, so I just want to put that out there for anybody that's watching. But it did provide a very nice basis for us to sit down and chat with everybody. But
and there's Eddie.
And I got to do a shout out to Eddie because I got to actually work with Eddie directly on this, and we spent about 4 hours doing the mapping aspect of what safeguards do you actually affect? Do you really? And sometimes it was a fight, right? Like I would argue, no, I don't agree. And I have to be the protector of the people that trust us to come up with what people do. And what it entailed was like literally going through your product and going, do I actually serve this exact meat? Let's read the safeguard. Let's read it like I taught people on Sunday how to do, which is the comma spaces, right? Because each comma space means something in a lot of those safeguards. And so I wanted to say very quickly that, Eddie just crushed it. I think I gained more professional respect for Eddie in getting to work with him in that capacity. And so kudos to you, brother. I love you. I'm glad you're on and watching. Thank you, man.
Eddie is amazing.
But, so back to your point of, the shaping product and understanding how it maps. How does that change, the way product companies can work in the security space? I would say it's not necessarily everywhere, but
basically we now have, it's been there for a while. I think it just wasn't being leveraged the way it should. Let's go back for 1 second. Let's go to the root
of the problem. It's your conversation. Let's do it.
Let's go to the root of the problem. All right. The root of the problem is we have a good thing happening and a bad thing happening. So the good thing happening, the statistic right now says 58% of small businesses and medium-sized businesses in the U.S. are going to use an MSP in some way, shape, or form this year.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. They're going to leverage an MSP in some way.
Which I think that's probably up. If I remember correctly, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a statistic that the greenfield opportunity was 60%, meaning there was only 40% adoption, which means we're shifting that tide to 58% adoption comparatively. So
Exactly.
Yep.
So with that happening, they're realizing, hey, as an internal company with 25 employees, 50 employees, I don't have a CISO. I don't have these people making these decisions to protect my business.
Yeah.
I need someone who does.
Or it's Cousin Eddie. Not
Eddie.
this Eddie. I
Not
love this Eddie, but other Cousin Eddie. You know what I mean?
Now, if we flip this over and we say, okay, great. So the focus becomes the MSP is now supposed to be the true expert, the guide, the advisor to those businesses when it comes to security, whether they're trying to meet SOC compliance or HIPAA or, CMMC or whatever we want to throw out there, PCI.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now we have a separate problem. Okay, at that MSP, let's say that MSP has 6 or 7 employees. They're growing. They're turning into what they need to be. They also don't have a CISO. They also don't have a SOC. They don't have all of those things at their hands.
So they're outsourcing that. And so you have even further layers of this SRM as well, right?
So they're outsourcing to that. Or they're relying on, this goes back to our ROMTIA conversation, they're relying on their vendors to meet some of these requirements. They're saying
blindly.
Exactly.
Blindly. Like you're doing it, you're fine.
I've installed a firewall, I've installed antivirus, and I've installed backup. We're good.
Yeah.
Well,
let's look at some operational processes. Let's talk about how you're doing things. Let's maybe see the breadth and depth of this conversation.
Let's dive into it.
Are your people able to do the work, and are you actually gathering the evidence of doing those things? And
but
exactly.
I think that is part of what this kind of middle group can help solve. One of the best images I've seen of this for an MSP is kind of like it's an image of a castle. All right. And so you've got like a drawbridge, you've got a wall, you've got the inside, you've got the center, kind of like Fort Knox. Yep. So you've got your customer here at the center. And I saw an image of a castle, and one of the things I saw was not just like one single vendor, but for each level to get into the castle, I saw multiple vendors. So it's like, hey, when it comes to the drawbridge.
My only problem with bringing back the castle one?
Sure.
I destroy it on stage all the time because I talk about how when cannons were invented, it destroyed castles. And we went from a walled garden castle model to now, everywhere. But I understand the analogy. So I just wanted to say that because it was wearing on my heart. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean?
But I think what comes in is we tie in some verification to that.
Yeah, you're now saying, are you actually doing the things you should be doing?
Yeah, so we're not saying, here's a list of vendors that supply antivirus.
Right.
We're saying, here's a list of vendors that meet controls, 8, 7, 12, 14.
Whatever it
may be. Okay.
And you're talking about on their own security and protection in that regard?
Correct.
Or are you talking about in what they serve, Lens 1, right?
Yeah, in Lens 1. So same thing. You go to the next layer. All right, what vendor meets this part of the lens? Who fills the gap here? Yeah. And that it's verified. Because if I'm an MSP, instead of just blindly trusting, now I come in and I go, hey, you know what? This other company has said, hey, I'm going to put a big asterisk on this. I would do it for us too. When configured properly and managed properly, i.e. turned on.
Yeah. Genuinely. Many people have rolled out AVs, EDRs in just listen-only mode and gone, why did it not stop? Because you only had ED, no R. You turned off the R.
You turned off the R.
Yeah.
Well, we had a problem. Somebody couldn't get through to something.
Exactly.
So we disabled that for now.
Yeah, anyways. I digress. But I think there's a mix of things that are a topic here.
Yeah.
And I talked to Jacob Horn about it. And the way I see this, and we're going to talk later, Jacob's coming on as well. But the way I see this, and Tim Golden, I think you may agree with me on this. And if not, I'd love to hear. But I see this as, if you look at the way 800-171, 171A assessment might play out on a small to mid-sized business or someone that's going through the DIB or Defense Industrial Base, and I'm using this as an example. If they have this assessment model, and as Jacob said on stage 2 days ago here at ITNation, if they have this assessment model, maybe it was just yesterday, God bless, but yesterday on stage, is you have this assessment, it's going to say, these are those things that someone else is doing for you. They need to be the one we interview. We need to talk to your MSP and see how they're doing these things.
Yeah.
That's one piece. Do I have the operational processes to do the things I'm saying I'm going to do for them directly?
Yeah.
But there's really not anything directly at this point addressing what I'm doing myself, because I don't handle CUI potentially, or I'm not necessarily subject to it. And that's not the part I'm asking you to disagree or agree with me on there, Tim. But the point is, there needs to be something that says, here's how the SRM is functioning, the way it works to meet these needs to serve 800, 171, 171A. But there also needs to be something saying, is the MSP secure? Like, not in the processes they're doing for the customer, because Matt Lee, if I'm going to destroy somebody, I'm going to get in as one of those humans and attack from that privileged position
yes.
as that human, right? So I think that's one of the challenges. I got somebody sneaking up. It's Riggs. Have a seat, brother. I think if you think about that, the challenge is, how do I know you're actually being secure in the way you manage your adding of humans? We saw this with Dragos the other day. They had an incident. It was well handled, but someone attacked their human before they even got on the payroll.
Yep.
Like, they got in and was ready to receive the instructions to sign in from their machine from the human they already compromised, presumably from an OSINT type thing. I got a new job at blah, blah, right? But the point is, how do you know that those processes are secure and the way they're functioning as an MSP or a vendor? And that's lens 3. For me, that is where I think there's a gap. I can take away the joke about RompTIA, but CompTIA in general, if they made a trust mark for vendors where you could do that in a way that I don't have to know what tools you're using to protect yourself, I don't have to know what the levels of the castle are.
Yep.
I just need to know, how are you doing these things? Check.
Verify.
Yeah.
Here's the data.
Yeah. And somebody said earlier, I can't remember. Yeah. Well, first off, 7-person companies doing nothing. 100%. And I think that's what's changing in our world in general. CISA plans to develop a central repository for software self-attestations, SBOMs, things like that. That's a whole different topic that I would want to tackle, because now you're getting into the product, how it's built, what it's built on, what it's built with, what's in the soup, if you will, right? But we will probably tackle that today with one or two of the people coming on, is my guess. And then Tim says, as a response, probably since I called him out, shared responsibility is one for sure, but having your own process, drink your own bourbon per se, and back to SRO again. And that's exactly it, Tim. I think that's what I'm really saying here is you have an SRO conversation for managing the what we do as vendors, what we do as MSPs, what we do as service providers in general. And then you have this shared responsibility matrix understanding of up and down. Right, I have an SRM for things that I'm doing down here. I have maybe some degree of common controls that I'm creating for them because of what I do. But I also might then inherit that from a Malwarebytes or from a blah, 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 or from a blah, blah, blah. Yep. And I know the right guy to talk to about some of this stuff here in just a minute. That's why I brought you in. But yeah, I think I agree with you, Tim. I think we're saying exactly the same thing. And it's, have someone prove you're drinking your own bourbon. And I'm very happy you kept using bourbon, not because I'm completely nauseous of last night's activities with said bourbon, but anyways, I appreciate you, Tim. It was good having you here, man. And then Brian Thomas, who I know and love, says, you and me. Huzzah! Exactly. So any thoughts? We're down to that last few minutes for you as well. And I know they go by pretty quick, but any thoughts for, if you wanted to chat about this to this audience of MSPs, what could they do today to help start down the conversation with their vendor? That's what I'm going to ask and put on your shoulders.
Absolutely. No, I think the conversation does need to be real, and it needs to be deeper. And I think some of this comes back to, training. As someone who has literally opened dozens of MSPs across the country,
sure,
trained many people, this goes back to what we touched on a little earlier. MSPs need to start asking the right questions themselves.
True. About themselves and about their vendors.
About their vendors.
Yeah.
Can I wake up in the morning and feel confident that, when a breach happens, because that's the way we have to talk now,
Fair.
Am I at least prepared for it? Do I know how to handle it?
Yep.
And am I holding my vendors accountable for the level of protection that I'm expecting them to provide? So adjusting and understanding what those expectations need to be. Is it just AV? Is it just a firewall? Is it this? What level are they taking it to? Because this breaks the circle of trust. The customer is trusting the MSP to protect their business. And a lot of times, like we just said, the MSP is completely trusting the vendor that if I install your product, I'm safe.
And nobody's going to find a way to go from inside of your product and destroy me, because that never had. No, it's happened.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, brother. Listen, I appreciate you being here. I'm going to be super excited to hang out with you at Beyond next week.
Yes.
What are you doing at Beyond?
I
know shaking babies and a lot of hands.
Lots of babies and hands. I've got a breakout session.
Cool.
We're going to talk about what's on the horizon for MSPs and security. Really stoked about that. I believe we've got a panel, and I'm sure that Matt Lee, you're gonna throw some crazy, fun, live, last-minute stuff up there. So
You never know what
You
I might
never
do.
know. It's-
I tend to beg for forgiveness rather than
stuff may
ask for
happen.
permission, for sure.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
there may be some.
you might get me in
security
trouble
cameras,
now because you
whatever.
already gave it away to whoever might be
I don't know.
watching this.
I don't know what you're
so
talking about.
it's not right, man. It's not right.
I'm unaware of this.
Listen, brother, thanks for being here. I
Awesome.
appreciate you.
Thanks, Matt.
Don't forget your cell phone. I may do bad things with it.
Oh yes.
It'll end
It's
up on eBay.
locked at least.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate that about you. And real quick before we get going, Riggs, Tim Golden says, so what I'm hearing in theme here is that MSPs needs to be educated more. I don't think you've heard that yet, Tim, but you've definitely inferred that, or I've implied that is the point that as we continue to educate the MSPs, you're driving that understanding that's necessary to go, well, let's look into this framework. Let's look into a set of safeguards. Let's go look into these things and understand what does good even look like. Mm-hmm. And as they get that, I think that leads me directly into kind of your jam and what you're doing, man. So, I kind of figured you can make up whatever topic, but we're already on this rant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go.
Well, I mean, to Tim's point, right? Need for education in the channel is absolutely huge. I mean, we're talking about some pretty new and some pretty meaty topics, right?
Sure.
When we're talking about all these layered controls, we're talking about defense in depth. We're trying to figure out
which you've been talking about for 25 years.
Absolutely.
So these aren't new topics to you.
No, they're not. But I mean, the MSP space has finally evolved to the point where, again, to your point earlier, we've evolved past this castle and moat where the firewall and AV were sufficient.
Yeah.
And now, we've got to worry about things like identity. We've got to worry about things like, is our EDR configured correctly, or do we just have AD?
Yeah.
All of those things. And so I really think that, having the awareness level at the MSP is really truly important. Having those subject matter experts there to make sure that the knobs are set correctly.
Yeah. And that means building those experts, right?
Exactly.
That means building them in your own organizations. That means building them in schools. That means building them in all the places that they may need to be built. Not to tangentialize, but I think that's a gap.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And so, as we start building out those subject matter experts, as we start having tooling that can start monitoring for those baseline configurations, right?
Yep.
We're saying we're implementing them correctly.
Right.
These vendor tools are deployed to our customers correctly, but how do we actually validate that? Where's the assurance part of that? And that's where, I think the next generation of tooling, you're going to start seeing more and more around baseline configuration management, stuff like that as well.
Well, there's also a maturity of product that's happened a bit, and I won't, give everybody massive kudos, but what I mean is like, I heard Heath Adams, maybe it was actually John Strand talk about this, was saying, when we talk about cloud pen testing, we're not really pen testing.
No.
We're checking configurations. We're
Exactly.
checking settings.
Yeah.
And I say that because I've been preaching this for probably about 5 years now. We're heading to a world that if I just was in Azure AD or Okta using identity as my primary methodology, I don't have a lot of infrastructure, I'm not creating a lot of product as an SMB consumer, and then I'm using SaaS apps, I can pretty much check the configuration for any set of thumbprints of those mixes, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of your point.
Well, yeah, exactly. So to use the cloud configuration example, right? Is it?
Sorry for spraying you with tea.
No, you're fine, man. Is it a flaw in the way S3 is coded, or did we just leave an S3 bucket like into the internet, right?
And those are two different conversations,
exactly,
right? And they both need to be addressed. I mean, that's absolutely the case.
Yeah. And so usually it's the latter, right? Thankfully, most of these major cloud providers don't have major vulnerabilities that are published on the regular.
It's fair. I've found one myself. Fair.
But so you're looking at configuration issues. So to your point exactly. When you look at that, it's literally how do I now continue to maintain the complexity and evolving complexity of these environments? Because I mean, Facebook and YouTube have given us this expectation that things just automatically upgrade and change. And we move the gas pedal and we do all these things. New features are implemented. New privacy features are implemented. All of these things. And I mean, even in our consumer apps, sometimes we're just stumbling around to find the right configuration setting.
True story. What's interesting though, and I say this on stage a lot too, is that I don't get my brand new Mercedes or whatever. Let's say BMW. I'm feeling a Bimmer today.
Yeah.
get my brand new BMW and go, "Hun, where in the computer settings do I turn on the left airbag?
Exactly,
Where do I turn on the
yeah,
right
yeah.
airbag? Can you help me out with that
I mean,
crash testing
it's-
thing we need?" No, they ship it to you secure by default.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and you've got to undo the seatbelt dinger thingy by that trick you found on the internet,
Right.
right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that's the way it works today. And this goes to, move Briggs to the microphone, please. There you go.
There we go.
How about now? We better, Tim? Okay. I'm loud enough. I'll get to the mic, I promise. But the point is that when you look at that, CISA's talked about secure by design, secure by default. And that actually covers both of the things you said.
Yes,
Secure by
absolutely.
design. Hey, AWS.
Yeah.
Hey, Microsoft.
Yeah.
You need to do these things to protect yourself as a hyperscaler. Oh, by the way, now it needs to be shipped secure.
Yeah.
Make people turn off MFA,
well,
right? Those things.
We, I think it was last night we had the conversation about CISA and the STIGs, right? They have these STIGs that are under the desk.
I was trying to be nice with my kind bar. I'm super hungry, man. No, it's fair though.
CISA has their STIGs, and if you implement STIGs to the letter, you're going to brick a box. Right?
Yeah, it'll be perfectly
it's
secure.
perfectly secure.
It will never touch data.
Yeah. And so, then it's here's the extreme configuration.
Sure.
But how do we configure it for our business purpose now? So I think that those are kind of the next conversations of what does extreme secure look like? Because even in the MSP environment, there's not a lot of things that are published that say here's what secure by default looks like for this EDR product, for this RMM, for this PSA product, whatever it happens to be. And they certainly don't come out of the box that way either.
No.
So,
and I think that's something we've just accepted. I think that's just the way it's worked, and it's come from people's immaturity. And what I mean by that is, you got me this product and I can't do anything with it. You ship this.
Yeah.
Turn this off, please. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so vendors have to live in this world, Microsoft and AWS included, where if they turn on all the features, it's back to your STIG problem.
Exactly.
Right. And you have to get to this point of where is that balance? What's a midpoint? What does 85% look like?
Yeah.
Right. Where does that come in? Because the car lets me still bypass the seatbelt dinger.
Exactly.
There's still things I can turn off if they're too inconvenient for my own survival.
Exactly. But it's still going to let you careen off the side of the cliff if there's
It's
no guardrail there.
It's true.
So
Absolutely.
So yeah. And that's the way software should be too. There should be all these guardrails, and the thing that people have mistaken in the implementation is, they've implemented speed bumps instead, right? They make it harder to go as fast as the business needs to go. And so people hate it. They turn it off. They demand that it's not there. It's the consumerization of technology,
True.
Right? I want it to be easy to use, and I don't want to see the security stuff. It's messy and ugly. But we need to figure out how those guardrails get put into place so we don't veer off and go down into the ravine.
And you saw it with Google, right? Like they were one of the first ones to say, hey, all of our personal accounts, they now have to have MFA.
Yeah.
That doesn't remove all of the methods. That doesn't even remove all of the risk. In fact, you're now seeing, to the point of things change, now we're talking about encrypting our tokens. Like who'd have thought?
Right, right, exactly.
Man, maybe these shouldn't be replayable without the nons from my TPM. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And that really comes down to these are secure designs, but the TTPs of the bad guys are just evolving
always
to where we have to. And with things like the advent of quantum and AI, it's only going to start moving more quickly.
Yes, and we are not necessarily even flexing the muscles yet to raise the arms to do these things where we can get better at it. Right?
Exactly.
Like that's I think the most giant challenge of this.
That's all right. Soon the machines will be fighting each other. It'll be fine.
You think?
Yeah.
Like they'll form factions.
Yeah.
Form.
See exactly. There we go.
Across and it'll be a battle. Like we'll actually see AI go, no, you're not killing humans fast enough. We're doing it more.
It's gonna be like Thunderdome.
I think we've created a movie concept.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, Riggs, we're wrapping up 5-6 minutes. What I'd love for you to do is, we've got an audience of MSPs, CEOs, vendor executives. Yeah. What are you doing these days that ties to what we've been talking about?
So so I'll give a plug to that's my co-founder Dustin Bolander and
awesome.
Wes Spencer.
Wes is cool too.
Yeah, he's all right with Risk Gauge. So we're putting together what's really more or less drive safe and safe for cyber insurance, right?
Sure.
So it's a continuous underwriting platform that is going to go through and look and make sure that Do you have MFA turned on? Do you have the response in your EDR turned on?
Yeah.
Just
trying to create classes of insurance,
exactly.
right? Like at the end of the day, you're trying to give real actuarial data that can be measured.
Exactly. You know, I mean, we want to make sure that we're ensuring good risk. And not only that, but sometimes there's just not that level of visibility into the tooling to say, hey, you know what, this thing is actually turned off.
True.
I mean, it may be news for somebody. So,
and that's a lack of APIs. Valuable. That's a lack. I mean, there's all kinds of things. That are
exactly. So, APIs reporting, and really the wherewithal to go through and build out a product that looks for those things.
Yeah, 100%. So
yeah.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate having you on and coming to chat with me. It's been great getting to know you over the last 6 months or so. But we talked about your backstory in banking and finance like that. If you looked at that as an early precursor, do you remember the days when they were going after the Patriot Act, after they started getting BSA, after they started doing all these things to have much more regulatory oversight? Does this feel kind of like banks that when they went through that, how immature they were and ignorant to some of these things?
Oh, absolutely. When the FFIEC started coming out with their guidance, and actually I'll even lead on third party due diligence piece, where we had to do vendor management all of a sudden.
Like what?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, okay. I mean,
when half the vendors might have been a janitor or potentially, right?
Exactly. I mean, are we pulling financials or do we need a SOC 2 type 2? And we're going to actually ask some really probing questions around this, right?
Yeah.
Really just depending on the scope of the service or product we're buying. This is really starting to get into the same thing. I'm really happy to see that hopefully it takes more of the PCI route with self-regulation. Hopefully the federal government does not get too heavily involved because that's just going to be a complete crap show.
And they'll never move fast enough to be able to keep up with it. I mean, let's just look at FIPS as a conversation today, right? Like, I have to work really hard to make the least secure protocols that we're allowed to use, like to some extent.
Yeah, what's the latest version of Windows is like from 2018 that's on the FIPS list, right?
You're like, what?
Yeah.
So I think I'm a big proponent of an SRO. I think that's the only way to go. But
absolutely.
Have you had anything we got our last couple minutes here, but have you had anything that's been surprising as you go through the work you and Dustin have been doing the last year?
I would say that really the lack of reliance on technology reminds me a lot of financial services than, really moving something that has traditionally been focused around kinetic events, right? Fire, flood, property casualties type of stuff. And then moving into this ethereal, cyber coverage where I'm having to ensure this thing that really doesn't even physically exist, right?
Rapidly changing risk that we don't actually see or understand until.
And let's face it, this is the only warfare domain that citizens experience on a regular, right?
It's fair. Yeah.
We're not getting bombed here domestically all the time.
Yeah. It was the fifth element of war, right? You have land, air, sea. Space and then
cyber.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see this and try to wedge it in because it really is. I mean, conceptual insurance is insurance, but the methodologies for performing the underwriting, doing the actuarial type of stuff is vastly different.
And the last 2 years of this, watching that play out from like actually decryment of RMMs going, they're out. We're not doing these. Right. Like, remember, Allstate, I think, did that for about an hour or two.
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm sorry. You have a Casay or a Connectwise in your name. No more.
Excuse me. I apologize. I withdraw my statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you find, I think that's a great corollary of what the banking industry went through and how it started to drive that. And even though I had a lot of banks and it was a pain in the butt, and you had to go on site for a lot of stuff, and you had to do all these things, I didn't see them getting popped either.
It's true. Well, I mean,
I'm candid as much.
Well, I mean, really the RMM, I mean, the difference between an RMM and a C2 is like literally who's managing your infrastructure.
True story. Yeah, there's zero delineation there. Exactly. It is command and control. Yeah. It's just good command and control.
Exactly.
We do that as a mind bias for a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Actually. If it helps me, it's great. If it's them using it against me,
it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah, totally. Anyways, brother, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely,
I appreciate you. I'll see you at Beyond next week.
Yep,
anything exciting you about Beyond?
No, I mean, really going up there, just hanging with my.
Because you live in that area.
Yeah, so I'm down in Colorado Springs. So yeah, so I get to
see a lot of humans you love and get to hang out with.
Exactly, man. So it'll be awesome.
Well, thank you.
It's going to be great content.
I'm going to bring on my next guest. I'll try not to move the kind bar too much for all y'all's pleasure, but. Martin, if you want to come jump in, I think you're next, if I remember. I'm not that smart, but
I can move up here.
No, Dave is. Dave Newty's next.
Oh.
I apologize. I know I did you wrong, man. I brought you in. You know what, though? If anybody else wants to sit up here, they can, and we can have a conversation. So I'm not going to be that harsh about it. We're kind of loosey-goosey here.
Remember, like kickball, a kid.
Yeah.
Somebody always gets picked last.
Man, I went last.
Long time listener,
Well, I mean, this kid's
first time
huge.
visitor.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's got legs for kickball, though, bro. I mean, not much beard.
Yeah, I'm short.
But,
I can do that.
well, you and I are pretty quick and movable. Well, you, not so much me. I'm oaf.
Exactly.
But anyways, listen. So, Dave, we've been talking today about, we started off talking about how vendors are being asked for things as they have a maturing client that maybe the person doesn't even understand what they're asking. And then on top of that, they're asking it different ways for every vendor. We kind of then went through this conversation of shared responsibility and that vendors need to get better and things like that. One of the things I'd love to ask, because you're a pure play channel guy, you've been at a couple different companies now.
Always.
You try to understand MSPs. That's your kind of your jam.
Yep.
Tell me what you've seen different in the channel just over the last couple of years from an MSP perspective along that lines of maturation that we've been seeing.
Well, I think the demands of the MSP is just
You're good.
it continues to evolve so greatly. I think sometimes from the outside looking in, you don't realize that sometimes you got to step back a little bit and understand that to be able to pick up on the number of categories that an MSP is supposed to be executing at an expert level, it can be unrealistic at times. And so being able to see it through their lens and understand that, especially as you dive further into cybersecurity categories, that there's a different pace for each MSP engagement and knowing where the maturity level is and the ability to tackle some of these challenges, because they're all expected to end up at the same outcome, but they're at a different starting point. And so if you can step back for a moment and say, hey, don't just vomit out what you can do as a supplier, but instead help me understand.
Where are you at in your mode?
Where
What
are
you
you?
doing? Like, tell me about
Where's your
your
starting
maturity.
point? I'll help you get there.
Yeah. And we've seen that, right? Like, one of the things I always say about security is none of this is new, right? MSPs, when they first started down that path, were all about efficiency, efficacy, W2 multipliers, reactive hours per endpoint per month, things that could be measured to make the customer experience better and to keep the pooters working. And MSPs got really good at that, right? Like really efficient, profitable, able to do that at scale. And even to your point, they still had to know tons of different technologies. They still had to find expertise zones for tons of different things they might need to know, whatever they encounter with different, clients. And a lot of the really successful ones got really good at normalizing their client, making them homogeneic, where they had the same switch, the same firewall, same VLAN structure, same IP structure, same, things where they could do those things in very meaningful, repeatable ways by creating their own normalcy of variables, right? But now you're seeing MSPs trying to apply security and thinking like it's this new void that's completely uncrossable, that's completely undoable. Oh, woe is me. But I asked those same MSPs to look back 6 years ago before they ever went down that path. It seemed just as insurmountable to get to an RMM and having all these things done and having PSAs and real live ticket entry times and all the stuff people had to go through as MSPs to get there. If you look at the same task of security, it's the same regimented efficiency and efficacy that got you here that'll get you down here, right? Because if I'm saying I need to make sure that all the firewall ports are set this way, I'm going to find efficient, scalable ways to do that over time, right? And I'm going to find ways to do this at scale. And so I think MSPs are probably the best primed to succeed, but in the same breath, the demand is extremely high, right? Across the board.
They understand the motion. They've been through it in other categories, and now you're layering in. Like, what is this MSSP that emerged alongside of me, and why is that? why is that separate from where I was, and how do I add that second S and end up in the same category? So, and I think you bring up a really key point. Is that
you get one a day?
The hard part, you get one. I'll give you the one. Yeah,
okay.
Is that they understand the motion and the engagement with the customer. It's just you've moved laterally into categories that you can't ignore or sidestep and understand that for every connection, every site I bring up is that I've got to incorporate a security conversation. The same thing. Yeah. But the best news and what I always tell people is that the emergence of these categories, the way they've gone as a service, the way they've gone managed, and companies that build their platforms around that business interaction model means that it's actually, these models are actually coming to you because they know your model and they're trying to design around that motion. And so there's really no reason to be
Well, and there should be revenue in it too, right? There
Right.
should be money in it to
I'm
fund and
participating in
drive those.
categories I haven't been in before.
Yeah, I'm going to find
and-
ways to charge.
And it's come
Yeah.
into my wheelhouse. It's in my motion. This should be something I'm very
And in
comfortable
some ways, I would argue there's a commoditization that's happening for a lot of what we did in the past because of some of those efficacy gains, because of some of those efficiency methodologies, because we drove the vendors to make it easier. We drove things like going to, like, remember as an MSP, if you ever went from managing Exchange, especially like Exchange 2013 and later years, to then go into an Office 365 or a Google, like, it was really simple. Like,
Right.
It just worked. And that commoditization, I think, has degraded some of that value MSPs bring in the traditional sense. In fact, you've already seen it. That's where VCIOs came from. That's where you now started having strategy meetings, where you started to try to add some strategic value. In fact, some of the clients that fired us early on was, Matt, everything just works. You're not adding any strategy value. What am I paying you for? Right. And the tools cost comparative to the overall is not where all that margin was. And so as that commodity goes away, it's almost like expanding into the understanding of security, digging into the things you can deliver well. I think is the natural progression to maintain value proposition for our clients as well.
Yeah, coming from the vendor side of that conversation, we didn't want to be unique in the motion. We wanted to be familiar in the motion and how you engage, and the complexity to be on our side ultimately when it came to managing and delivering a technology stack to be easy to bring to customers and easy to work in to the existing flow of how you're handling an account. But from a business opportunity now means that, and I'm adding in performance areas and working with my customer that I didn't have before. But the supplier's coming in and understands that I need consolidation of management. I need, if I can incorporate this into my PSA or into my RMM that I already have in place, that this is a very natural motion. This is something that I could have been doing 2 years ago, but now it's here today, and it works directly into the interface and the back and forth that I already have with my customers. And something when you're talking to an end customer, it's like, this is something I need to be doing for you. This is not exotic. This isn't bringing in things. These are fundamentals that I can now incorporate in to the same footprint and get away from segregated, stacked up different types of siloed execution, and say, I can now incorporate this in. And so for future users that come out of the platform, it's now going to be an automatic motion into areas that are not optional, that aren't that aren't things that you're going above and beyond the requirement, but now it's just a much smoother motion.
Well, and what you're getting at is that same efficiency, efficacy kind of conversation for MSPs that's developing. I think one of the key points you hit on was saying, hey, listen, is this integratable? How deep does it integrate? And I'm talking to people coming into the channel. It's like, I need you to understand MSPs need to live in their PSA. That's all about time management, efficacy management. And if it isn't in the PSA, it didn't happen, right? It's an old statement that's still true. If it didn't exist there, I can't prove it. And it comes down to those things. So the deeper your integration as a vendor that you have to those PSAs, right, whether it be ServiceNow or ConnectWise Manage or whatever it may be, the deeper integration you have into those, the more I can automate. I can have closed loop ticketing where, let's say I get an alert, but it's cleared and something's done it. I can actually get that as a time entry, and it wraps it up and closes it. And I don't have it sitting there on a board from some email pipe that came in, and I still have to go look at it manually instead of it actually saving me work. It added work, right? Because now I have to actually go and look at that ticket and look and see it and go, oh, that's already cleared. Machine's back online. I'll go close the ticket.
Right.
That's death. And I think, to your point, vendors are making it to where not only are their platforms themselves more integrated and more capable of doing things across, like you're also seeing that be more integrated into the things we have to live in as MSPs. I still carry the MSP badge. I know I'm a couple years out, so I apologize. I keep saying we. If anybody wants me to stop identifying as an MSP, I can. But the understanding is that for that community to succeed, it has to be deeply integrated.
Yeah, I mean, as on the provider side, you need an equal amount of mind share committed to not only the efficiency and effectiveness of your core technology stack, but the effectiveness of the management layer that goes along with it. And you're not leaving behind the community. I think that's a difference you'll see in providers that MSPs will work with, that where MSPs were a secondary consideration as opposed to a primary business model consideration. And everything that happens within product development is that every change that's made within the product, that you have somebody in engineering that their calling card is, what does this mean for our partner who's utilizing it, that we aren't developing internally as a silo and what looks cool to us, but we have a mind's eye to at the end of the road, the person that's in front of the customer and trying to deliver that environment. But do we have a consideration there as well? And you can easily see a drop off on a provider where they are in that landscape.
I've had this conversation with vendors. I do a lot of consulting with vendors. I know it's hard to believe, but
Really?
I know.
They
Blows your
listen
mind? No, I don't know about that, but they hear it.
Yeah.
No, I do a lot of consultation in that. And when people are trying to come down from the enterprise space into the MSP channel and are trying to make that transition, they have a giant gap where they hit it out of the park, right? They either, to your point you're making of, they don't understand the consumer.
You're all in or you're not.
Yeah. And so they try to just
You can't fake
adapt and you have to be really in it and drive it.
Mm-hmm.
But those that are able to make that transition find a lot of success. I mean, if you heard the numbers yesterday from Wayne Selt, he says that the latest stat was that 58% of our GDP was now a small to mid-sized business. Like, holy crap.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, we talk about that here in the UK. It's more like 90s, apparently.
Right.
But as you think about that, that means these enterprise players that are doing these very long sales cycles, chasing the 42%, would have harder problems, obviously, from the breadth of so many different SMBs. Mm-hmm. But MSPs are that aggregator, right? MSPs leaning into that channel and that providership, and whatever we label them from marketing, MSP, MSSP.
Security is an
blah,
equal
blah, blah.
opportunity problem. It doesn't care if you're 5
It's
employees or you're 5,000
does
employees,
not,
right?
100%.
And so there isn't some cutoff point that says I
Right.
don't need
those
protection,
guys.
right?
Yeah.
So it exists for everybody. So how do you do deliver platforms to your customers that are agnostic to how big or small they are? It doesn't. That shouldn't fall into the conversation.
That's normalization
at all.
And I think that's solved through normalization. To your point of the more integration, platforms do more. Let's look at what would happen if all of my clients were the same. I talked about this with Riggs earlier. If I had everybody was Azure AD, everybody was tied into SaaS applications, everybody had the same controls and safeguards placed upon them in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I can script the hell out of that. I can automate that, right? You have Roost with RPA, my sticker here, I got my awesome dope Roost sticker. But you can automate a lot of those things. And as the variables normalize, as the API layers exist, as the things mature and get more integratable,
Mm-hmm.
right, to the point, which is where APIs have to exist, is to do that integration aspect,
right?
As that continues to get better and better, then you could deliver a 2-person shop the same technology I could deliver to a 40-person, to a 100-person, to a 200-person.
Exactly. Cloud native multi-tenancy in the design of the platform means that the quality of the service that you're providing doesn't have to be compromised based upon the size of the account. And when you get to that point, that also means that there's efficiency in the ability to deploy it as well, which means that you have same day capability to answer requirements that bring someone to a modern scale on the fundamentals that they need in place for protections, efficiency, performance, like all of those categories. And it's daunting from the MSP side to be able to look at this, enormous landscape of logos that are out there and go, okay, what is my landing package for a customer that does that? And a lot of the consideration around what that package is has to be around what's the simplicity of the deployment, the effectiveness of the technology stack, and the ability to continually ongoing manage and update, because security is never static, right? You're never optimized. You only if you're lucky,
optimized for today, maybe not tomorrow.
If you're lucky, you get to the point of optimizing. Right, is the ing is the part is that when you're at the end game, you're at the stage of optimizing.
That's true,
and it never ends. And
That's true.
It's never a static.
But it can be done at the scale of one. And what I mean by that is I could do that same optimization across a very normalized client set. Right, the same way. 1 or 2 users versus 50 or 100 users, and I can deliver that experience the same way. And I think earlier what you said is, it's about the process wrapped around it's those other things. And I have a saying on this where it's like, you cannot tool your way into security. You can't.
No.
I can't scalpel my way into surgery.
No.
If you would agree to let me cut on you and do your appendix removal or appendectomy, I'd probably fumble my way through. I could pick up the scalpel, but that doesn't make me a surgeon. Doesn't make me understand the process that needs to exist. And so I always say, you can't tool your way, to cybersecurity, but you can have the right process. I know that when I enter the surgical room, I've already scrubbed my hands. I know that I have to come in and do my first incision about 2 inches laterally below the left rib, whatever it may be. I know those things. I'm following a process. I'm following a procedure. I'm following it quite well. And so when you think about that, I still couldn't do it without the scalpel. Right. I couldn't just sharpen up this nail over here and go, here we go, boy. Right? It's not going to happen. And so you do have to have both. And I think one of the things that I haven't addressed, and a little bit of my aha moment from just this conversation with you, is I'm talking about lens 1, which is how does your tool or product help me meet a safeguard or control? Lens 2, shared responsibility to some extent questions. Lens 3, how secure are you as a vendor? How much have you actually done to protect your own damn house? Are you just rolling around with an old antivirus and nobody's doing anything? Or are you actually following these things? Because you can get through a SOC 2 without answering that question in a real way. So when you look at it, there's almost another lens, which is what's my interoperability? What is the integratability? How easy is this product to use? How integrated is this product to use? How well can I do this from an efficacy perspective? And I hadn't even tackled that part of it, right? Because that's what has to be sussed out in sales engineering meetings and calls. That's some of that
Right.
things. But
Yeah.
it would be really neat if you could codify some index of that. That you could say, if you're on this type of RMM or this type of, then we're super integratable. And anyways, just maybe a side.
Yeah,
tangent,
we
but-
run a really robust platform of technologies in a single footprint, but we're very clean on articulating that you don't have to trash can everything that you have. Let's take a look at what's already on the ground, the investments that were made, the subscriptions you're obligated to, that you don't have to get rid of. You can coexist with those and fill in the gaps and areas where you're missing, and allow you a pathway down the road to consider when those existing investments come end of life or the subscriptions reach end of term, that you'll have a fork in the road to decide upon that I can continue those autonomous decisions, or I can consider a platform that not only doesn't just narrow the supplier scope, but that those policies are tightly integrated with the other policies. It makes it easier to manage and faster
100%.
to deploy. And
Yep.
and that's the home run for a partner. And as a supplier, again, is seeing it through that lens and saying that when we come into the conversation, you don't have to trash can. Like, nobody's doing nothing. There's already something on the
say
ground.
So pejoratively.
Yeah,
you poor MSPs, you must be doing nothing to secure.
Yeah,
your
I don't
clients,
start
right?
working with an MSP and say you've been doing nothing and
I'll help you be better
underserving
from
your
zero.
customers and you're horrible. No, you've been doing the needful along the way, and now the requirements are starting to shift and change, and so we know you're at an inflection point where you have to decide what's the future going to look like. And so how can we as a provider take that into consideration and provide a management plane that makes things easier while also creating a much larger business opportunity by making sure that you're not doing anything exotic, but that you're hitting the categories that you need to be hitting for your customer based upon what's happening in
reducing
the
their
market.
risk and increasing their profitability.
Exactly.
Right? At the end of the day,
All that complexity should be ours. It should have nothing to do with the MSP. Serve your customer. Here's a world-class platform to use, and we can be as much or as little as you want.
Well, I got to switch Dave's in the chair, but I want to say thank you for being here.
Good luck filling these shoes.
Well, this is Martin. Martin's just hanging out. I got a Dave and others back here. We're going to switch out, but I just didn't want to feel imbalanced. You're bigger than me, and so with somebody over here, it feels like the
I'll grow out next time. I have the
all right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I appreciate you, man. I'm looking forward to seeing you at Beyond. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm excited for the thousands of plus humans and MSPs that are coming.
We'll see you next week.
It's going to feel like a gathering of friends.
All right.
So
Thanks, brother.
Thanks for being
here. Take care.
All right, Martin, I think I got two gentlemen here for the next one, right?
Yeah.
Or am I wrong about that, Dave? You and...
we got two.
All right, we're going to have to boot you, Martin, but thanks for keeping it warm for him. I'll see you in a minute. I'll see you in a few.
Yeah, I'm sit back here.
All right.
Keep the seat warm.
We did. We kept him quite warm. What's up?
Not much.
So, me, I'm sitting here talking in front of, people all day.
Thousands of people, I'm sure.
Tens of people.
Yeah.
I think tens of people are paying attention to this.
Yes.
I digress. Comment if you're in the chat. I know that LinkedIn stats aren't quite well represented, so comment, pop in, make fun of my friends here. You've been sitting in the room. You've kind of heard some of the themes we've been on today, and I'm taking a super deep look at vendor risk. That's kind of my jam right now, is this conversation, as well as MSPs and their own growth and their own aspect. You work at DefenseX. You, in some ways, and I'll say it this way, have a bit of a product that initially was more mature than the consumer buying in our world. Like, they just didn't understand this understanding of browser isolation, sending the risk off to another place for sandbox methodologies. And you see that at the enterprise space. I mean, there's been several players at the enterprise space, but I got to work with you guys like 5 years ago or something.
Correct.
Like, it's been a very long time.
Yes, you got your hands on this product.
Yeah, and Justin, in fact, let's move the mic in the middle so everybody can hear. Why don't you all introduce yourselves, because people may not know who you are. But we'll start with you, Justin. You used to be an aider until these people snagged you.
Yes.
I mean, if I'm being nice to my friends here.
Yeah. So my name is Justin Passero. I'm the new sales engineer for DefenseX. I used to work for Pax8 as one of our, many sales engineers, the unsung heroes of Pax8. So
I sing about them.
I know
in the shower,
and I think,
but I do
I
sing
thank you
about
for
them.
that. I thank you for that. So I've actually been working with DefenseX for over 2 years already. So I when I first saw the demo that they gave me, they literally showed me live how they were able to steal credentials and MFA credentials and then put them into a website.
Yep.
And get access to Office 365. And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
The fact that you can sit there and prevent people from putting their passwords in.
Well, and that was one of the things, back to your maturity of product, that actually helped y'all sell faster, right? If I remember when we said, hey, maybe we should do some contextual type engine where it tells you you've never been to the site and type something in. And your product team built that in like 5 weeks or something. Like, it was extremely fast. They added that into the product. But then that helped it sell because it met the maturity of the consumer where they were. And that was the piece they understood was, hey, don't let me sign into fake bankofamerica.com. Right? Don't let me get phished in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
But, I don't want to talk about product. My real goal, I've got, my SE brain here. I've got my buddy over here with Dave. Let's talk about the maturing MSP. And, when you're in your sales engineering conversations, what's changed in your mind from 2 or 3 years ago? Not just about DefenseX, but just your normal interactions with these MSPs till today. Got any thoughts on that?
I think some of the big things is they're starting to realize how they need more than just one product.
Right.
Take a look at, EDR platforms. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't need to do anything else. I got an EDR. I'm like, well, that's your last line of defense. What's your first line of defense?
Right. What else are you doing? That's the detection part. That's when it goes pop.
Yeah,
right?
That's when the worst case scenario happens. You
Yeah,
have something there. Finally.
Yeah.
That's when people are like, oh, I never thought about that. I'm like, yeah, it's like, what's your email security product? What's your web security product?
Which MSPs have been doing, right? We've had spam filters for convenience to reduce the spam, that then pivot into the security front end.
Exactly.
Right?
So spam filters have been there forever, but now we're talking phishing and things like that, malicious attachments. Your talk yesterday about how Linus Tech Tips got attacked off of a phishing email that looked really legitimate.
Yep.
In today's world with ChatGPT, it's gonna get that much more complicated. So now you have to have way more defenses in play, more layers, because someone's going to click on that ChatGPT that looks so realistic.
Yeah.
And then what's going to stop that? Okay.
And specifically, you're saying ChatGPT generated language, great forms, great conversation.
Yep.
Which, that just makes it more scalable and faster, for sure. I agree with you there. And are you seeing the MSPs, you said they now understand they need more products. You know me, back to I'll pull out the one string ukulele that I have, which is CIS.
Yep.
But as you're watching these MSPs start to adopt NIST, CSF, CIS, are they asking more questions about breadth of tools even more than what you're, initially would have been? Because before they were just picking at, maybe I need proof point, maybe I need whatever. They weren't necessarily having a why behind it, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So when like CIS and CMMC gets talked about, they're like, hey, is this product CMMC certified?
It's not how this works.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm like, well, the product doesn't need to be that certified. You do, and yes, this product satisfies X, Y, and Z,
and hopefully doesn't dissatisfy A, B, and C.
Exactly.
Right, and those are the points that matter for sure.
It's so nice to see MSPs finally realizing they need those controls in place, because when you can start to sit there and go, okay, we need this and this and this. Now the MSPs get the tools to offer their clients. So when client A needs to be, CIS and then client B needs to be CMMC, they can now sit there and go, okay, for these controls, this is your stack. For these controls, this is your stack.
Sure.
And it's just
sure. And you may choose not to serve a certain client, right?
Yeah.
If maybe it doesn't make sense or you can't scale. And, you've got people that are focused on the DIB. You've got people that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's interesting, and I can't wait to talk with Jacob Horner about this, is, he has a firm belief, and so do I, that you'll start seeing that extensibility spread to more and more and more and more categories, and people are going to need to step up to that capability. But to your point, I think knowing your stack, knowing how it aligns to what you're trying to accomplish, knowing what can and can't be used, knowing what processes need to or not need to exist, those are all things that MSPs are kind of waking up to in that world. love to hear some of your thoughts on, what's changing in the MSPs, and if you would also introduce yourself. I'd skip. We just got into nerd
No
conversation.
kidding.
from me,
It's all
man.
good. It's all good. So I'm Dave Make. I'm the channel director for DefenseX. I've been with the company for just over a year now. Came in a really interesting time because our product was really just launching.
Sure.
As we discussed, you had your hands in it quite extensively before to help us kind of, mold a product that fit the market, which we
Yep.
appreciated so much. So we really just came out in the market, I would say, in the last year. And to your point earlier, it was about, we were doing all these demos and onboardings, and guys were like, yeah, this is a great product, but where? How do I use this?
Yeah.
Should I use it? Do I need it? Now, 6 months later, 8 months later, it's like light bulbs going on. And, everything you guys just discussed just comes into play, right?
Sure.
So we end up checking a lot of boxes, and now there's a demand for this product. So the market's caught up with us. And I think that's an education thing. It's always an education thing throughout the entire market, throughout everything, all these shows that we go to, all these conferences we go.
Wait,
all
we
the
go to
work
shows?
you do. Yeah, well, we pretend sometimes, right?
Oh my god.
So yeah, these are all learning experiences
Sure.
for everybody, for not only the vendors but the MSPs that attend.
Yeah, so let's pivot for a sec. We've
Mhm.
got just a few more minutes on
Yep.
y'all's time slot. But you guys are going to be at Beyond,
We are.
and I think there's going to be some great stuff there. What are you excited about the most from Beyond?
Well, it's the ecosystem that Pax8 brings to the table. Yeah,
They do sponsor my breakfast, lunch.
There you go.
I'd like to say thank you for that.
No kidding. No, I think from what I'm hearing, the attendance is going to be outstanding.
Yeah, we're
really,
over 1,000
really,
registered.
this
I
is
haven't
really
seen
exciting.
recent numbers, but-
Yeah, and just getting to see all the people from Pax8 that are going to be attending. It's a great crew. We love hanging out with them and getting to know them better. They've helped us along so amazing. They've really grasped our product and helped us. And then just growing with Pax8, right? I mean, that's why we're going, because Pax8 supports us. We support them.
One of the things, if I was going to say what I'm most excited about, is this is kind of like that. And I'm not going to say other conferences don't do this well. I've seen some outstanding conferences from an education perspective this year, really the last year and a half. But if we go all the way back to the beginning of this broadcast this morning, and we're talking about education, we're talking about needing to educate our MSPs, educate their capabilities, empower them, drive their success. I think that what's cool about Beyond is it started from our Academy team.
Correct.
Most of all the sessions and everything that happened at the very beginning was all from Academy about teaching,
Mhm.
not selling.
Right.
Selling.
Yep.
Because if you teach, they can go sell, and then they can buy.
Correct.
Right? And so
Yes.
it doesn't have to be about selling.
Yes, and
Yeah.
and actually, kind of funny. Last night, I had this conversation with this gentleman, and he's like, "We have to figure out our stack. We have to figure out what products we need, so and so." And he seemed like he was in a bit of a jam.
Sure.
He was like,
It's a very
"There's a lot
Canadian
of."
way to say that.
He
So,
really,
yeah,
it's a
that's
jam,
good.
yeah. So there's obviously a lot
I'll
of
go back
things-
and fly my Canadian flag again for you. It's back here from Ash. All right, we carry on. Sorry.
So I actually said to him, I said, you know what, to make your life easier, you should contact Pax8 because they're going to help you with that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, but it makes sense because this gentleman is going to probably spend a lot of time trying to figure it out and probably do it wrong.
And I think, and maybe we'll touch on this a little bit with Martin too, because our time's coming to an end.
Yep.
Earlier, we were talking about mapping to CIS, and you participated in that exercise with me pretty awesomely. But earlier, we were talking about mapping to CIS. The other cool thing about trying to manage a stack is if you could get data about Lens 1, as I've been talking about, which is this understanding of how you help me serve a need or a control or safeguard. Lens 2, how do you deal with your SRM? Do you offer SSO? Do you like those kind of things about your platform and you? Maybe Lens 3 down the road about what your security looks like as a vendor. Do you have Trustmark? Do you have something that's saying that you're secure? And then bringing all that data together with that Lens 4 kind of conversation about what's your interoperability, how easy are you to use, how quick can I deploy, how much scalable is this for me? And all of those pieces together. The nice thing about machine learning and data is you can actually find that stack. You can actually find, based on cost, as well as efficacy, or at least breadth, maybe not efficacy. But I could definitely see machine learning helping us surface a lot of that data. I'll use AI for the buzzword if everybody needs me to, but it's really machine learning.
Yeah.
But thanks, Martin. Appreciate the extra laugh back there, buddy. But if it makes everybody in the the SEO gods happy, we'll say AI. But if you look at machine learning, I think we can actually get really robust stack packages
Mhm.
built out. I think that's one of the things that maybe a little Johnny foreshadowing I might be tackling as our company continues to go data centric for our helping people in that regard. So, anyways, any last thoughts? Y'all and I have been friends forever. That's
Yeah.
why I wanted you to come on and have chats.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
You're a traitor from being a Paxator, but I still love you, and it's okay, and it's all right. We don't hold
We
anything
didn't
against
force them, by
anybody.
the way.
No. Hey, listen,
We did
we
not
don't have to
force
get
them.
into all this. Listen, I don't want to talk about
That's
old
the
stuff.
key.
I don't even want to talk about old
It's water
stuff.
under the bridge,
Yeah, it's
right?
water
Water
under the
under
bridge.
the
We're not even
bridge,
thinking about it. Appreciate you, brother. It's
Yeah.
great to get to work with you. I will say, you made it a great and enjoyable experience to take me building something as I was flying it into trying to make this data set that exists around CIS. And it's great working with you, man.
Yeah, I love working with you.
So-
I've been trying to work for you even back when I was working at Paxaid.
I know. I didn't even know you were working on a tangential project there. It was awesome.
Hey,
And you as well, my
thank
friend.
you very much. And I don't know if you remember, 1 year ago, basically today,
Okay.
you interviewed me down in the hallway of this show.
I did
this very
at
show.
ITNation Secure. I was doing
And-
a conferences on the road type
That's
thing,
right.
which
and what was
doing
I?
again.
I was a nomadic guy just coming to a show trying to figure things
You
out.
were,
And
you
now
were.
Here we are.
And now
with a
here we sit.
full-on booth.
yeah,
doing
it's
it.
awesome.
Yeah.
And I
Appreciate
think
your
that's
time.
what's cool is I love watching your growth as well. Like we all talk about vendors and how they frustrate. We want you to be successful.
Yeah.
We want you to do well. If we're betting on you, we want you to be successful.
Well, and
So
that's the
I
way we
love
look
it.
at it with the MSP, right? We're
Yeah.
partnering with the MSP. It's
That's
not
a
we're
great way
selling
to
them,
say
we're
it.
partnering with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, gents,
Right on.
I'm going to
Thank
get
you
to
very
Mr.
much.
Martin
Yeah.
White. We're going to do a reprisal show. He was my first guest ever on Beard
Oh.
Banter, and so we're now coming back for that. Get the band
And
back
I'm
together.
sorry I couldn't grow a beard for today.
It's kind of scruffy. It's kind of scruffy. It's not
I
bad.
need some work though. I see yours grew in very fast from November.
It's a Faustian bargain. You only sell your soul once, but it was hair. And it didn't come to the right place. So thanks,
Right on.
buddy.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate y'all. Martin, if you'll come over on this side, we're going to go left seat this time just because it's easier on the microphone.
Let's try out all the seats. I love it.
Yeah, man. This one's the best one. This one's not good. You don't want to sit in this seat. This is 3 hours of talking.
Oh,
But I love doing long live streams and having long conversations. People check in, check out, and you never know what'll be said. But you through Jonathan Schofield initially, right? Came up with the title Beard Banter.
Yep. Because we all got beards. We love beards.
Yep. We're like, let's have a beard banter.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll have a chat. I think you were definitely my first guest. And we were talking about, identity, right? That's, I think, what we kicked it off with. And I'll start with kind of this statement. And I was going to get into it when Riggs was here, but I didn't want to steal his thunder. And he's an amazing human as well. But I don't have to fly my Canadian flag anymore. I can fly something else now. We're good. So what I think is happening, we are seeing a world where security was built, even in the enterprise space, as beeps, bloops, and bops, and watching the computers and looking for the threat activity and looking for the things in the machine and looking for which is still relevant.
Mhm.
But I think we missed the forest for the trees early on, and it's starting to come full circle that everything is about identity.
Mhm.
Everything is about identity.
Yep.
And identity-based security that's looking at, is that Matt? What does Matt have access to from an asset perspective, which is true too, right? Like we do have this conversation of I have assets, but when you think about it, the identity matters the most as from a security perspective. And when you talk about people saying SOAR or all of these things that extend into XDR, are talking about taking the identity and understanding the assets they hold, software assets they hold, data assets they hold, and reaching out and doing stuff in more places to remediate or to stop or to block or to protect or to those things. And so it's really all about the identity in the beginning. We just focused first on the endpoint.
Yep.
We just focused first on that. But it's more about where the user's fingers land, right? As Phyllis Lee likes to say, that your network ends where your user's fingertips land. That's the opening salvo. And let's go. What do you have thoughts on, man?
So the identity of the person and what they have access to is a large question in the last year. Since we talked, was a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
That is a big question that MSP's customers are coming to them with. We see this in a lot of our UK clients and our Australian clients and clients all over the US. Is like the end user, owner of the actual end client, will come to the MSP and say, hey, who has access to my network and what do they have access to?
Yeah. What do you think's driving that?
I think it is cyber insurance, and it's like some of the news articles that talk about hacks that have happened. People have been compromised. I saw a while ago that somebody was offering $100,000 for an administrative username and password.
Yeah.
And if you ask an owner of a company, hey, would your MSPs technician give away username and password for $100,000, and how would you know?
Yeah.
They get real nervous.
Yeah, I saw you just do it right then. I had goosebumps come from
Yeah,
it,
like
it's tough.
Yeah. So that proving of who somebody is and what they have access to, and to be able to answer that beforehand, and then especially after an incident, to have that traceability and logability and auditability, like who did this, why, where.
Yeah. Well, and now you're getting into it. So not necessarily after an incident, but during an incident, it comes into play. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. Is identity centrism says, what did Matt have access to, right? And you're starting to talk there about principle of least privilege.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you're thinking about principle of least privilege, it's do I have the right access? Should I have access to this? Do I have a need to have access to this? Right. And is the access too much? And you get into that. And I like to term those as blast radius reduction principles, right? They're things about saying, how can I, even though I know I'm going to get punched in the face, can I deflect it a bit? Can it scrape off my chin? Can it be something where it's not a direct impact? Can I make this a limited piece? And when you start thinking about that very question you started with, which is, who has access to my stuff? You get the ability to say, what stuff, right? What stuff's important to you? What's the most important? And so now you get into this identity, but data value, data importance, principle of least privilege, blast radius reduction, things to say, I actually need to reduce that when Matt's compromised, he's only going to have these things taken, not all of the keys to the kingdom. And the easiest way to make this make sense when I was doing this was, as an MSP, I wanted to come to vendors and say, I want single sign-on, and I also want the ability to do skim provisioning and the ability to bring groups and sync groups over that I can use to set access control. I didn't know at the time I was asking for 6.7, right? But the point was, I wanted that, and I wanted to be able to manage it in one place. And when I'd asked these vendors for this, it was like I was asking for the world. But what it allows me to do is a very simple practice. We had Dallas, we had Wichita, we had 5 different states, different regional offices. And we had teams. We had these pods. And we said, okay, pods. Team Alpha, Team Bravo, Team Charlie in Dallas. Well, whenever Team Alpha, Johnny, gets compromised, or Sally, I don't want to pick on anybody in particular. When one of those get compromised, I want the 6 customers they were supposed to be working on suing me. And that's it. I don't want the 697 customers we had at that time suing me. I couldn't. It was outside my insurance policy limits. It's certainly outside what we could have dealt with as an operational capability from that perspective. And so I wanted to limit the blast radius. I wanted, when that grenade went off, it was blast radius was limited to as much as possible and less troops were killed. And those are the things where you can only do that from an identity centrism. It needs to be about Matt. And do I have access to this? And should Martin have access to that network?
And how quickly can we revoke that access? And how often does that access mechanism change?
Yeah, well, now you're even getting into JIT-GIA, right? This just-in-time, just-enough access, where you're saying, hey, now I don't want to even have administrative access to those 6 customers, except for going through some operational process that allows me to escalate that capability, right? Now saying I need to get PAM-type solutions and privileged access management-type solutions. That makes it to where if they're shooting me, they have to be a sniper, not a machine gunner. Because they have to hit right when I have that time, right when I have that escalated access and control. And Paul Anderson hit the nail on the head, and we'll have him here later. But, identity is the core of security, 100%. And I feel like, and Paul, you've been in the enterprise space, and we'll get that. Maybe I'll get that when Paul gets on. But it's a topic for us to put a pin on, is that I think even in the enterprise space, that statement was not well understood. I think they got, identity, we need an Active Directory, we need to extend that out with Federation. I think they did a lot of those things. But I don't think they understood that device compromised equals identity challenge. Identity challenge needs to extend to other things. Let's go ahead and look at this from that perspective, right? And let's focus on limiting that from that perspective. But yeah, I think Paul hit the nail on the head as far as identity is the core of security. So and Martin, you've been, go ahead.
And in the enterprise space, it's in one client. So you get somebody compromised, it affects that client. But an MSP technician, if you have one technician compromised, how many of your clients are compromised? Like you said, 6, but if they're using poor identity management across the client base, it could be all of them. And I've even seen MSPs use such poor. I've had MSPs admit that they're using the same password at all 700 clients for this shared global administrator password.
Oh my goodness gracious!
And you're like, so how do you know what happened where? And like, it's in a ticket.
Yeah, we got it. They said they did it.
They said they did it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So
like that, the problem at an MSP is, though it's generally considered smaller scale than enterprise, it's actually a bigger scale problem.
It
and
is.
the number of interaction places you need to talk
With
about.
less
or things
maturity,
seen.
investment, and capabilities.
Yeah,
Too,
yeah.
right. And I point these fingers at enterprise too. In fact, I think some of the conversations I've had with mid enterprise made me happy I'm working in the MSP space. If I'm completely candid, I feel like there's still some of those giant gaps there that exist as well.
Yeah.
But you've been involved in identity as a conversation for that's your whole core.
Whole core.
I mean,
That's what we
where you
do.
come
Privileged
from.
account management.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what are your thoughts as we get to one common core identity? How does PAM have to change? Like if I'm now Matt Lee at Pax8, or I don't know if you've even seen some of the distributed identity things. Let me be Matt Lee, and I now work for Pax8 in my identity. But what has to change in a PAM type solution as we continue to see more adoption of single sign-on, as we start seeing those where I'm actually just going to be me to sign into that environment, and they're going to know that I'm me when I sign into that environment. It's not a separate password or PAM. How does it have to change? Does it have to get more integrated? How does that work?
It has to get more integrated and more guaranteed that of those three things, memorize, secret, something you are, something you have, you have to have more guaranteed that those truly are you, so that when that identity is stolen, because identities have always been stolen and will always be stolen.
Totally. Physically in real world as
Physically
well
in
as
real world.
digitally.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So you have to have better guarantees that when that is stolen, you can use, here's ready for the buzzword, the catchphrase,
Okay.
AI can detect that
AI
you're
twice
not,
in this one show?
That's right.
Come on, man. AI is going to solve this for
AI.
us.
So the AI can know this person is now logging in two different places. They're in two different physical locations in the world. Something is wrong here. Let's shut off their access, not just to these places for now. But let's put an elevated look on what other places they might be accessing, so that we can either restrict their access when they first log in and give them additional challenges. You already see that in a lot of tools. When you log in, you'll get this prompt or an email that says, this is the first time you've logged in from this IP address, this physical location.
Yeah,
because
password managers are that way a lot, right?
And they're like, can you provide this additional challenge, additional proof?
Right.
When we get to a more integrated, worldwide single identity provisioning, then that's really going to have to step up. And I think that we are years from that, from being able to prove who we are. And the AI to check that needs to not just span a client, but needs to span all of an MSP's clients. And
everywhere I might be me touching something.
Everywhere you might be you touching. And you need to, and that has to be owned, in my opinion, by the individual that is proving their identity.
Yeah.
Like Matt Lee has to own the AI that says,
I'm
everywhere you have and you are you.
Yeah.
And that AI ownership of your access pattern becomes part of the proof of who you are.
Yes, I agree with that. That's a method of approaching it, right?
Credit card companies do that now.
You're starting to see, though, a push, and maybe I'm getting a little nerdy on this one, towards DID, DID Web, DID Ion, which are distributed ID Web, and Ion methodologies. Ion being based on blockchain, Web being based on web or DNS entries and hosting sites. But, the core concept of what could be applied with that is I could be me as Matt Lee, identified as me by some cryptographic methodology of distributed identity. Intra is a great example of this, Microsoft Intra. And then bring that identity into my identity for the MSP, let's say. I'm still me. I own proof I'm me. I own that. And you could interestingly see that play out to be some of that mechanism for that, right? Because the threat actor is going to be the me that is Pax8. I'm going to be the me that is underlying that. And that means that they may not have this same me for that attack. And it's also not a public surface area. So I think there's really interesting things in technology around identity coming in to one-to-one, knowing I'm me, the human, understanding I now work for Pax8 may be irrelevant, right? Think about the problem of having everything you sign into Emily at Pax8 and you leave Pax8. You have to make sure you have stuff on your personal stuff. And I point that finger at myself. I know this sounds stupid for anybody watching, but when I was at our MSP, I felt like an owner. In fact, I was a shareholder and made actually really good money when we sold. It was fantastic. I was a very happy man. But I treated it that way, and I used my account to sign in with personal stuff. And this was, 10, 11 years ago. I was just stupid about it. But the work to carve out that identity out of my core work identity to something that's just me was what prompted me to have my own domain identity. It's what prompted me to have my own email servers, all those things that bring it back to the Matt that is Matt, not the Matt that is Pax8, right? Before that. But I think you're seeing identity go that same way, where you could even see cryptographic proofs or escalated proofs being now send from your wallet your proof that you have your driver's license. I don't have to give you the driver's license. I can just send an asserted proof that I have it. And then therefore I'm able to move forward. So there's really interesting stuff happening there.
Zero knowledge proofs.
What you're talking about there. That's exactly what you're talking about. Elaborate on that.
We use zero knowledge proofs all the time in our API so that when a technician says, "Hey, I am me. We use a zero knowledge proof. Do you have the key that says you are you? Yeah, we're you. You're you. You're good. Here's your information."
And I don't even know I don't even need to know much about you is kind of the point, right? This is just matching quids to some extent.
Yeah.
Okay. Not summarizing
more
too much.
mathy than that, but
Okay,
yes.
Good. Yeah. I didn't mean to demonetize the work behind the scenes. That's on me.
Yeah, but like that unique identity for me, in 2000, I bought martinwhite.name.
Sure.
And I have had that email address across 7 different companies, two of which I was partial owners in. And like I recognized early on that I did not want to tie my identity as me to place that I worked.
did not.
Yeah, even like my
sucked.
phone, even when I had a company provided phone,
Yeah.
I kept a phone number on the side.
Yep.
Where everything went. And that is even easier now with Google Voice numbers. They
True.
can be forwarded to cell phones. You don't actually have to have 2 physical phones.
Right.
Though you were not to the point yet where you can virtualize your phone on a phone, but
Well, they do have some enclaving that does exist, right? Like you do have some of those things. Like on Android, you have the Android workspace. You know, in iPhone, it's significantly more at the application layer, right?
Yeah.
Just comparatively. But you're right. You can't just have this separate virtual phone that pops up and you're like, yeah, I'm on this phone. Totally. But I think the core of understanding identity and having that ball to play around with in your head really helps understand security.
Yeah.
Right. And it is that difference of that identity of proof. And I think to your point, the zero knowledge proofs, those things that allow us to do things without actually having to understand the identity, right? In some ways.
I can prove I have my driver's license, but I don't have to show it to you.
Yeah. It reduces the privacy impact of that.
Mm-hmm.
It reduces the privacy implications for the receiving entity.
Yeah.
Right. If you think about me saying, I don't want to collect your driver's license. I just want to know that you have a valid one. I don't want to have the number stored somewhere. I don't want to have it where I could be attacked and it could be used and doxed against you.
Yeah.
I'd rather you own that. And this what triggered me down this path when you said, I think the user needs to be responsible for that. And I agree with you. I have some friends at Credivera that, thankfully allow me to advise them, and they're doing some really neat stuff in that DID space. But I think to your point, that core of identity and being able to own your own documents and not have to share that makes it a lot easier to secure the identity as well, because you're not floating all this information that would be part of that proof out there in the world. Like the ice cream store doesn't need to collect my social security number, right?
No.
There's probably not a reason for it.
No, but they still want to track you and know what your favorite ice creams are.
Yep.
And when their special seasonal ice cream is available, they want to send you an email.
Yeah. They want to say, Chunky Monkey's in. It's time, right?
It's
Or
your
whatever
day.
it is. Yeah, it's your day.
But they don't need your social security number to do that.
They do not. And I think that's another topic we might delve into is like, as a vendor, as a company, and you've already kind of done this, but what's the minimum to collect? How do you start deciding what do I need to actually store to reduce my own risk, but still be efficacious in what I'm trying to do, right? To your point of like tracking your customers and their growth and all this information. Give me your thoughts on this. Like, what's that? How do you come to what the minimum I need to collect to reduce my risk, but still be efficacious in my job as a vendor?
So as a vendor, specifically a PAM vendor, we can, and the technology easily exists to collect absolutely no data that we can read. We can asymmetrically encrypt everything. We can make we can't see anything. If we do that for all credentials, usernames, passwords, we can't see any of it. We don't have the cryptographic keys to decrypt it.
Sure.
The stuff that we do keep and collect is only for convenience of the managers of the MSP.
Okay.
That is where
it's for the multi-tenant management aspect. That's the
management.
Predominance of the data that exists.
Yeah, that is the
That's
data
funny.
that we have access to. We can see like the names of the technicians.
Yeah.
That are at the MSP, because the manager doesn't want to have to bring out a private key.
Oh, that's GWID 087824 or decrypt, and now I know it's Johnny.
Yeah, I know. So like it's just convenience, and that convenience versus security is what every vendor has to fight, because nobody wants a product that is super secure and gets you locked out when you
the Stig from from Riggs's conversation.
So like that balance is important. And that single pane of glass people are talking about, and the vendor vetting that people talk about, it's all encompassed in there's the security and an efficiency. They want the security, but that efficiency is very important to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, and it is a balance. I mean, you have to keep the business running. You have to be profitable. You have to be able to scale. And there's always that, I think, trade-off of convenience and security. And, to Riggs's point, like you could make a machine so secure it couldn't do anything. Right?
Yeah, you take it offline. You
very,
gap
very
it.
Secure. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's a convenience, and I wouldn't even say convenience, because I think that puts a negative spin on it. It's what is the minimum balance to actually do my job and function with the technology I have, compared to securing and protecting the data that's in my charge.
Right.
Right. And I think that's not convenience if it's done right. It's a balance.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's that, because you could be so secure in the way you handle PAM that it's got 12 different people that have to approve before an escalation request, and you have to get it on a third Sunday leaving the second train from Boston or something.
Yeah.
So you can get really, really specific, but not actually serve your constituency or businesses. There's
some efficient things, like if you want to only have the just-in-time access, but you want the account to be persistent, so the account gets enabled just in time. When your name gets put on a ticket, that account for that client is enabled.
Yeah, and that's the beginning of your attack surface.
That's the beginning of your attack surface until that ticket is closed.
Yeah.
So like, there's things like that we're working on that are going to help with that.
That's kind of
efficiency
cool.
and security.
Yeah,
there are, but it's that efficiency that really ties people down.
Yeah.
Prevents them from being secure.
Well, and you just got back to Lens 4 that didn't even exist before Dave was sitting here. Jerk, made me have more work in my thought process. But that's back to that deeper integration.
Mm-hmm.
If I can be more integrated, that I can say now, I can actually see your ticket got created, see this identity needs to exist, create this identity or bring it back from sleep, right? Or disable
Bring it back from sleep, so you have traceability and
you have
long-term
that
existence.
Exactly, and bring that back up. Then now you're actually using that integration to be more secure with the same type of behavior you might get without that. So let's say Microsoft offered it, or somebody else, and it isn't integrating into PSA or bringing that kind of stuff. Then I'm going to have to create my own methodologies to accomplish that in that regard. So I like that, and it's another example of what Dave was saying, where the more integrated, the better scalable, the better it actually increases security efficacy.
Yeah, and I think there's I've seen this in other vendors, and I've been told this by other vendors, that you can make a product that is fully automated behind the scenes. Nobody ever sees it, but it does exactly what it needs to do.
Right.
Then they're not going to buy your product anymore because they don't think it does anything. So there are a lot of vendors that they could automate everything out of the way, but they want to be front and center. They want to be top of mind on the technician, on the manager's computer, so they continue to think that they're adding value. So there's from a psychological vendor perspective.
Yes, the eyeballs in the glass.
Yeah.
They like to say, right? And I've had this, I've actually advised on this exact problem of, you want the eyeballs in the glass so that you can get the logo, you get the understanding, you get the adoption, you get the usage, you become harder to shake loose of, right? But sometimes no glass and no eyeballs is way more effective. I mean, look at the back end of Roost is a great example, or other RPAs like them, I suppose. But being able to do robotic process automation is one where you really don't want to see it.
Right.
In fact, you don't want to be in the logo. You want it to just work. You want it to just function. And so I think there's a balance there as a vendor. But I also believe that when you go more data-centric as a way you select products, you don't have that same problem to some extent. If you were to have only people selecting your product because it solves a need, and it makes it more effective, and whatever, it may be on safeguards, it may be on some goal you're trying to accomplish. But if you're dealing with that type of a consumer, then eyeballs in the glass get less imperative potentially, right? Because now they're buying because it does this problem and it solves it. And therefore, they're going to still buy it and use it. In fact, the more they don't have to interact with it, the more they think it's like a Ronco steamer. Set it and forget it, right?
Set it and forget it. Yeah,
Set it and forget it.
Yeah, an Instapot.
Yeah. Instapot is the modern. I'm just showing my age here, I think, with the Ronco steamer. But yeah. Anyways, I think that's a great call out. So you and I have been, connected for quite a while. How much has your world changed? Even being a PAM product, you were kind of like Defense X, an early player and ahead of where people were buying. Yeah. Right. And you and I sat down and kind of had that conversation of like, people aren't doing this yet, but they need to be.
They need to be.
And are you seeing a change? Has that delted in the last year?
It has. It has changed a lot. People are coming to us on the regular and being like, hey, our cyber insurance requires we have unique accounts, an MFA tied to individual people, or we have these compliance requirements that say, hey, we can't share this administrator account. And we also have, like I said earlier, clients coming to MSPs and saying,
that's what moves
has
the needle, bro.
Access to my
that
network?
Moves the needle.
Oh, yeah.
That's like a dollar check writer right there saying, I need this data. I need the answer.
FFEIC, all these security frameworks, especially the federal ones and the banking ones.
Yeah.
They are very specific. And people are coming to the MSPs, to the IT providers, and being like, who's got access? What can they do? And then also in the last year, there has been a significant change to like the other people here talked about, the vendor management aspect of MSPs. I have had to fill out one particular vendor questionnaire I filled out was 267 top-level questions.
Oh, they went with the full STIG. Good.
With sub-questions.
Yeah. This wasn't the STIG Lite. This was full STIG.
Oh, yeah. And like it was 3 hours of work to answer all those questions in the detail they wanted, and there was back and forth on it. And they became a client. But I must say, and it is a big
that
gripe.
client acquisition cost.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah. For a $200 a month product.
Yeah.
Is draconian.
It is. Yeah.
And
yeah.
that has really started to come forward. We're getting all these extra vendor management questions. Like you said, raising the tide for the whole, you've been pushing raising this tide.
That's my jam.
Yeah.
100%.
MSPs are listening and they are raising the tide and they're asking vendors more questions.
Yep.
And like we're able to answer all those questions, but it's a lot of work. And there's no standard form.
And what if there's where I'm coming back to it? This goes back to the very beginning conversation that we started off with John Harden, which is, what if there was a normalized way we did this?
It'd be awesome.
What if it was always the same? You could replay the same answers. Everybody took the same answers and knew what to do with them. Didn't make you go, well, I need you to further explain that because we just need to get that set and the right way to answer it done and the right assessment framework that's going to come to that. And I think that's where somebody like a CompTIA or Trustmark, I bet on CompTIA just because size, density, public traded across the globe, mass, already have a testing methodology, already have the right people in place. So I would bet on this, CompTIA play from that perspective. But it would have to make you more profitable with less of a ROI challenge to, new client, going to get $300 a month, great. Yeah, but I had to spend 9 hours working to get this done, just in high level, CEO
high level.
and product manager and owner hours to get that done. And then the same answers aren't good for the next one necessarily, right? Or have to be translated into some conversion of that. And so I think that's
especially when you're selling around the world. And the questions come from England or different questions from Australia.
Totally.
Different questions come from Canada. Different questions come from the US.
Which is why you're starting to see, and you're Johnny foreshadowing me for my next guest, which is Jacob Horn. But that's why you're starting to see a bunch of idiot scientists win out from NIST as a somewhat globally adopted set of ways we look at things playing out. And if you look at the Five Eyes intelligence community of US, UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, they're at least trying to go down similar paths to try to normalize some of this. And I think to your point, we're global. Mm-hmm. We have global reach. People have global reach. Pax8 has global reach.
Yeah.
And that means that we have to answer that in 5 different ways. We have to answer that in 12. And I think the more normalized these answers get, the more scalable we can do the security things, the faster we'll find the charlatans, the faster we'll find these things that we need to see about companies. And we'll have some level of assessment. Sarbanes-Oxley did more for the financial health of organizations after Enron than almost any other thing that happened. It brought in systemic board-level presence on that. You're seeing the same thing with the SEC on us now. But I have faith, I have belief that we're going to get there. So you got about 4 minutes left of our time, and I want to give this to you as anything you'd like to chat about. Got a bunch of MSPs and CEOs and things potentially watching this over the course of today and the next few days. What do you want to talk about? What would you say? What would you leave them with? What piece of advice can you improve their world with?
Internally, we talk about the security journey that MSPs are on. And we have a chart, like MSP, in the particular space we work, there's a chart. If you are at this point, you're in this journey, this step in the journey, your next step is here. Your next step is here. And to talk to somebody at the step here early in this journey, when they get, you can't point to them to the end of the journey and say, this is where you need to be.
Right.
You both sound elitist. It looks unaccomplishable. So you've got to, and as a voice in the network, a voice that speaks to people, you have to help them along the journey and say, hey, we know this is hard. There's a long journey here. You're here. This is the next thing you should look at. This is the step you should take. And then when you're here, you should take this step. And then when you're here, you should take this step. And you can't even point out that they're on a journey lots of times.
Right.
Because they're in the forest.
Yeah.
And the path ends right there at the field they're about to walk into.
And some of this comes from no barrier to entry and it being anybody that wants to spin up can do it. And I'll tackle that eventually in today's conversation, I promise. But,
like barbers are more regular than MSPs.
Bro, when we wanted to get our beard shaved for this stupid beard shave thing, I had to find a licensed barber in the state of Florida that was willing to come hang his shingle to cut my hair. And it's going to grow back.
Yeah.
Right? Money doesn't grow back after you lose it from a massive event necessarily. So, that gets into that barrier to entry. But we do have what we have. This is where we sit. And I think you're right. Guiding people down that journey is the path. And I actually, you touched on something somebody else said is like, I can't remember who it was earlier, talking about operational maturity and how that impacts what they can see and what the next is, whether it's forest or trees, conversation maybe. But I feel like we are seeing a pretty unilateral raising of the tide, even in that entry-level MSP. When they're asking friends on Reddit and going, what should I be thinking about? Thousands more things come out than would have come out before.
Yep.
Right? You're seeing the camaraderization even lift the tide of others that are succeeding. So Martin, great to have you here, man. Are you going to make it to Beyond next week? You going to
I
show
am
up?
not.
You're not.
No.
You know, I knew that I should have asked the answer first. I actually don't care, but I'll miss you there, brother. So,
Yeah, I would love to be there. It'd be awesome.
thank you,
Yeah,
man. It's good seeing you. That was a really good knuckle pop. I heard it in my
Yeah.
ear. People really got that.
I used to
so.
do a bunch of rock climbing. I tendonitis in every finger, and then
get
like,
it.
they still pop.
I get it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Man, it's great having you here. Thanks for coming back for episode 42.
Yeah.
42 episodes later from our first one. And
Yeah. So we haven't said my company name this whole time.
Oh,
Can I throw it out there?
you know what? One, Martin. This is
One.
the first
One.
time. I'm going to give you one.
All right.
Go ahead, Martin. Tell them who you're with.
We are with Martin White with Tech ID Manager. Come check us out, techidmanager.com or booth 505 here at ITNation Secure.
Awesome, brother. I allow it once a day, so hopefully
a
Jacob
day.
Horn doesn't want to pimp Summit 7. So, all right, good.
All right.
Thanks, brother.
Great
Appreciate
seeing
you.
You have a
Hey,
great day.
What's going on, brother? Have a
See
seat,
you
Jacob,
too.
over here.
Wee woo, fun police are here. We're here to talk about compliance and controls.
Oh, but it just gets my juices flowing, man. So we're okay.
It does, man. It really does. How are you, man?
This moment's been needing to happen.
Yeah,
Sure. I've followed your work for the last 2-3 years or so when you've really been a public persona and get to see, because you've been screaming this in private for a long time.
Yeah,
I have to imagine.
Yeah, into the void in
Yeah,
private.
the volleyball,
at the
Wilson.
clouds.
Yeah.
Just yelling at whatever buses driving by.
801.71a is an approximation of 853a in its current format.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening,
Yeah,
volleyball.
exactly. Wilson.
But I think that speaks to the change in our world.
Yeah.
I think the fact that you have a stage, you are out there just absolutely evangelizing in what I think is the most likely answer for what has scalability across critical infrastructure, across really most of what makes the United States GDP tick, if you will. But introduce yourself for anybody that may have been living under a rock for the last few years.
I'm Jacob Horn. I am Chief Cybersecurity Evangelist at Summit 7. We're a managed service provider that specifically focuses on facilitating DFARS, CMMC, and NIST compliance for companies in the DoD supply chain. Chief Evangelist, doesn't probably need as much explanation in this crowd as folks.
You only used like 5 acronyms in that first one.
Yeah.
So let's go.
So we'll slow it down for everybody.
Let's make sure people get
The
it.
Department of Defense is a federal agency that has a very, very large supply chain, typically manufacturers that produce components and or services that roll up into awesome things like fighter jets and submarines and satellite control systems. And so the supply chain is global, it's humongous, it's very mature. And in terms of security, there's almost none.
Yep.
And there's a tremendous amount of sensitive data that flows from the DoD out into that supply chain. And the government has been wrestling with how to get some assurance and control over it for the last 10 years or so. And that involves a bunch of acronyms.
Yep.
So typically what happens is, and this sort of gets to your point about the way that regulatory winds are blowing, from the national security strategy on down.
Natty Stratty.
The Natty Stratty.
I'm glad you used it too, because I'm Natty Stratty guy.
Mission. The pound of flesh that I want from the Office of the National Cyber Director is they had the chance to release the Natty Stratty on the 20th anniversary of the original National Cyber Strategy.
Sure.
We only had 3.
Yeah, 2000. Well, what was the first one? So I know 2018, 2023.
Yep.
What was the first one?
That would have been 2000.
It was 13. I could have done my math.
It would have been the early 2000s, right?
Okay,
but
fair.
I remember
2003.
the buildup. I felt it was an epiphany. I was like,
Sure.
I know what day it's going to come out. I
Yeah,
can see
it's
the
coming.
future. And I was like, this is going to be awesome. And there were probably like 4 people that actually cared.
Yeah,
and
sure.
then it came out 2 days after. And I was like, you blew it.
You could have done
blew
this
it.
was done 2 days
And
ago.
so,
you know it was.
So as a result, their punishment will be that we will lovingly mock the national strategy by calling it the Natty Strategy.
I came up with a different reason.
Yeah.
I just wanted to seem like
Yeah.
an influencer and have some
Great
cool
minds.
word.
Great
but we did
minds.
both get to the same point.
So the Natty Strategy on down, what you'll see is this common pattern where everyone agrees security needs to be better.
Yep.
Everybody agrees reluctantly that there needs to be probably some sort of forcing mechanism because the markets
Self-attestation doesn't work. Is that what you're saying?
it's
Anyways,
this
I digress.
yeah. We've got all kinds of examples of that, right? So you've got this problem. It's a market failure, right?
Sure.
We know that the market doesn't reward security inherently. That's a very well-known fact. In the
And
world of
nor
security.
really has the threat and the impact landscape been as escalatory as it is today.
Sure, yeah.
I think you have a second factor of that where it's gone not just a factor of some 5 or 6% growth a year. It's asymptotic, right, in the last couple
absolutely,
of years.
absolutely. And so so you've got this problem where when you have this market failure, there has to be some sort of a way to bridge the gap, and all of the options are not very good, right?
Right.
Regulation is not a good tool, but it's one of the only tools that's kind of out there.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that when you try to impose regulations, you are limited by your authorities. And so that's why you see this fight with EPA regulations or pipeline security regulations coming from the TSA, or these random things that are occurring.
Which is actually a subchild of the Homeland Security, which is
it's because on the books there's some obscure authority that can be interpreted to say we have the ability to have control over this sector, and now we're going to try to inject well-meaning cybersecurity requirements through those avenues. That's causing a lot of strife government-wide and across many sectors, because people don't like it, and
the authority doesn't always align to the accountability and necessarily the out product of that. Right?
So in the water sector, most recently, you can see this where the EPA is saying, we're allowed to do what are known as sanitary surveys, and we interpret that authority to say that would include things like basic cyber hygiene.
Yeah, the information systems that create said sanity is a bit of a reach.
Now, I know what they're saying. It makes total sense, but the lawyers are having a field day.
I imagine.
And so what I also predict, and this is maybe a bigger picture topic that we can talk about, is I think that eventually what will happen is, because of this battle over authorities and this traditional battle over regulations, I think we're going to see the politicization of cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
And that's going to be very unfortunate because that's going to be very unhelpful for moving the needle. Now, that's regardless of whatever your politics happen
and some of that's our adversaries in some ways, right?
A
lot of that in even just raw politicization, I won't get too much into it, has been through disinformation methodology.
And it's really unfortunate, man, because you come to great events like this and you have these great collaborative. I tell people all the time, I'm always struck in the world of security that we have this culture of people giving just presentations, sharing knowledge. It's almost like the idea of personal branding and just putting yourself out there and participating outside of your particular job role is a thing that is deeply ingrained in the security community. It's probably the thing I love the most about
100% right. Like DEF CON, doesn't matter, B-sides, all of those things.
And it doesn't really matter what your particular discipline is or where you are in your career. It's so normal that's just part of the world.
I hadn't thought about that till now, but that's absolutely true.
Yeah,
it's cool.
It's so funny because you'll see, we're both hang out on LinkedIn from time to time,
a smidge,
a little bit, and you'll see people in other industries talk about personal branding. They'll talk about developing content, and it's a real struggle if you're like a personal trainer or something. But in security, it's just so natural.
It's already part of our world. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the landscape is just so varied, and people, I would say, so let me back up a little bit. When people talk to me about getting into security or what they should work on, I always tell them it's such a varied landscape and it's so hard to tell what you will eventually be doing, that the best thing you can do is to foster your sense of curiosity. Because if you start to foster your sense of curiosity in your free time or after work, you start working on a project, or you start working on research. Then you go and present that research, or you write it up, or you blog about it. And then pretty soon when you're at an interview or you're networking and people ask you, what are you working on? You're talking about this thing. And it could be extremely technical.
Yeah, it could be extremely nuanced too, right?
But because you're interested in it, it's just effortless. And so as a result, I think that there's just so much going on in terms of how many things cybersecurity touches, that it is very easy to pursue your curiosity and then to tell people about what you're into. And so when you're hanging out and everybody's just talking about it, you're talking about your hobbies and your interests. Yeah. And when you get a bunch of people whose hobbies and interests tend to be around this kind of stuff, you just have this explosion of knowledge sharing. Yeah. It's awesome, man.
I think there's another concept part of it too. I think in security, we're one of the only professions where we actually have to teach something someone is unwilling to learn in order to get buy-in to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man, that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. It's so funny because for years, and we still do this. The industry still does this. We just flog ourselves and say, you got to speak in the language of the business. You got to speak in the language
My
of the
doctor
business.
doesn't.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
And so, I decided that I was so tired of hearing this and like
Sure.
struggling with this problem. I was going to go to business school. And so I used my GI Bill to go get
thank you for your service.
Oh,
by the way.
yeah, and to go get an MBA, and went to business school and got done with it. Great experience, by the way. Go Anteaters. And when I got done, I was like, man, the problem is just so fundamental. Like, it's so systemic. There is no easy button. We say this a lot of times with security,
Yeah,
but
totally.
there is no way to just convert our perspective on the world into the language of this or the language of that. And so it's this like Sisyphean uphill constant struggle.
Man, good use of Sisyphean.
Man,
so
it's
Sisyphus
the-
brought out into the understanding of Sisyphean. I mind blown
Yeah,
right now.
You
bro.
got to push the.
Were you in
boulder.
Catholic school and got in
Yeah.
trouble a lot too? 'Cause that's
Yeah,
how
look
I
at
got my
knuckles,
vernacular
right? Look at my
command.
knuckles,
Yeah.
right?
So
So and so I think as a result, it's this unsolvable, eternal problem.
Yeah.
And it has tinges of. It's so crazy to me, man. Like, especially how the cyber threat intel industry has evolved over time. So
good and bad. in
good
some
and
ways.
bad, good and bad for sure.
Monetization. Of
Yeah,
getting
it's
but-
there's definitely negative trends too. But the part that I'm always struck by is when I started my career in the Navy, I got stationed at the National Security Agency doing some cool secret squirrel intel stuff. And this was really before this cyber industry kind of exploded, and
Sure.
a lot of the intel community people left and started great companies like Dragos and
Yep.
stuff like that. And the level of understanding about like cyber threat actors and intel and stuff like that is available in like a Coursera course for
Right.
intro level. You can just read a report that somebody puts out for
Sure.
free, is on the level of what the intel community would have been putting out internally like 15 or 20 years ago.
That's nuts.
It's so insane.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's not exactly
Yeah.
the same because of sources and methods, but
Totally.
like our general understanding of APT groups and their techniques and
Yeah.
methods, like
You can go to MITRE and read about every one of them.
There
to
would
some
have been
extent.
probably 24 people who knew the specifics of a given, threat
APT
actor
41
group.
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, whatever.
Not even 10 years ago, right? Or 15
Agreed.
years ago. It's so
Agreed.
it's-
I would even take that statement maybe 7 or 8 years
yeah,
ago, probably
it's
across the board.
it's phenomenal to see what's going on. But to your point about why there's all of this information sharing and there's all this stuff, there's just so much, right?
Yeah.
It's just there's so much stuff, and then to try to consolidate all that down, explain it, let alone to then make it into a business case. I mean, this is
Now,
this is
right?
a
That's
really-
right. The last mile.
man, this
of that,
is
yeah.
this is. I mean, it's a fascinating industry just from the number of disciplines that you have to bring together in order to make it.
And it
work at all.
kind of, and this is at least my opinion, it kind of matters when you were born as a company too. If you were born in the last 5 years, you probably are already using more modern techniques. You don't
Yeah.
have as much brownfield. You don't have as much of that was built when nobody cared, right? When you
right.
federated everything to AD and just moved it wherever you needed
Yeah,
it and you had
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And now you're getting to a more secure place where if you were born in, I hate using the buzzword, but in the cloud or in the now,
Yeah.
you can approach it much differently. I mean, look at, I don't want to get into Jedi, but the conversation of, the U.S. government taking towards AUSG and AWS and saying, hey, we can start building on top of these hyperscale frameworks in a very secure way. But if you start a company today, I don't have much of the sins of the past from that.
Yeah.
I can actually start with a business case that has an integrated cost for security before.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I
Like,
mean,
that's
yeah. It's just like it's better and different, and I think it's just the level.
There's some
of,
bad to it too, right? Obviously,
I would say that on the whole, everything is the potential to be better is definitely there, right? But there's also a difference between having enough rope and having enough rope to hang yourself,
Sure.
right? And so, but as you do that, I think we sort of jumped in here into like people getting into the industry. It's like there's just a bewildering number of entry points into what's going on. I was talking with Joe Slowick, formerly of Dragos, who I spent some time in the Navy with, and we were having this conversation about. We don't actually have an agenda for this conversation. I'm just going off the top of my head.
too.
Here. We were talking about how, unfortunately in the security industry, some folks are experiencing layoffs and there's kind of this contraction. And people were saying that they still have a stigma sometimes about having the appearance of job hopping on their resume. And I've always found that very interesting because software developers don't tend to have that stigma because their resumes are almost like portfolios where they went from.
I got to work on this cool
I
project.
got to work on
this cool project.
interesting project to interesting project
Right.
to interesting project. And he and I were talking about, depending on like where you end up and where that company is in their life cycle and like their transformations or their security journeys, your projects that you're working on could be very different, and they could be very interesting or not very interesting.
Yeah.
And so it's
sometimes only judged whether you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you get done with it, ours isn't, oh, look at this really neat product we built. It's we reduced risk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
It's not near as sexy in that.
It's just such a strange thing to step back and look at. Like for my example, right, to get back to all this random acronyms that I was just ripping off at the beginning of the conversation. Like I didn't start out as some weird legal adjacent compliance defense supply chain guy. Like I was a cyber engineer just like everybody else, working the RMF ATO
Does that make it harder
world
or more contextual?
In my specific situation, I've just sort of built off of that understanding of the RMF ATO world.
Sure.
The way that I describe it, right, in the defense supply chain is everybody was living their happy little lives doing RMF packages and ATOs and working with NIST controls and bringing in as much, new and cool security
ATO's
technology.
authorization to operate.
Yeah,
RMF.
RMF is risk management framework.
Yep. Okay.
So
just giving everybody the definition.
In the federal security space, you have to do all that. And then one day, the government found out that all of this data that they're obligated to protect on the federal side is sort of spilling out into the Muggle world.
Yeah.
And there are no...
out where someone's cutting apart or making a... Yeah,
and
exactly.
this gets us back to that idea of authorities, where the government doesn't have the authority to make you go get an ATO, to make you go get these acronyms, to make you go get this stuff, but they're still obligated to protect it. And so now what are we going to do?
And also obligated to make the part.
Yeah.
And also obligated to deliver the defense contract at the time it was meant to be delivered.
Very
right?
difficult.
Like, let's just get into that conversation.
Oh, yeah. Very difficult problem, right? Yeah. And so they are there. So now they have to search around for the available authorities to allow them to try to get some handhold over what's going on.
Sure.
And the available authorities were the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplements.
Right.
These are all the contract clauses
that's
show
why
up.
the DFARS interim ruling. That
This is why, well,
in.
now all of a sudden, if your curiosity sparks off as to how the heck we're going to go from a world of people who understand controls more or less and how they interface technology to a world of small businesses, managed service providers who do not have a background in that. There are no frameworks. There is very low maturity, very different worlds. If you're going to try to span those two things, suddenly you need to learn about contract clauses. You need to learn about rulemaking.
Yep.
You need to learn about all this goofy crap that nobody's ever heard of.
Yep.
And that's basically what I was doing for the last couple of years.
Well, and so I started in my 800-171 journey in 2017, roughly late 2016. And it was because I had people, I was in Wichita, Kansas, and I had people that worked for Northrop Grumman and worked for Boeing and Spirit and all the ones that were taking those systems. And they started to ask about it. It started to become just a checkbox on the form. Are you 800-171 compliant? Yes or no? And I got so frustrated sometimes. I won't delve off in this tangent too much, but I had two main separate customers. One was about a 290,000 square foot multi-bay, huge Makino operation doing tons of parts a day. And one was a smaller shop, still probably a third or maybe a fifth of this capacitance, somewhere in that neighborhood. And this gentleman and the CEO and the executive team, when we would meet, I had an advisor, I had a third party kind of like you that really understood 80171, understood that I wasn't serving most of those things, understood that they weren't doing most of those things, that we all needed to come together to figure this out. Right. That's what we were doing. And my grand pitch in my mind was, if I could do this, and if I could build an SSP, and if I could build my SRM, and I could system security plan,
see, you did it
and
too.
shared responsibility.
See, it happens quick.
It does.
Happens quick.
But it makes it easier to talk about it, right? But if I could build and have my SSP for me, an SRM, and an SSP for them, they all referenced each other. The methods of collection and evidence were all the same. I could make that really sticky. Yeah. And so I was leaning into it. We worked very hard on it. I spent a lot of money with this consultant to try to, what you do for people, I was paying someone to do that for me. And as I was going down it, I had two camps. One camp leaned in really hard and they said, I want to meet it. I want MFA on everything. I want to deal with all these things. Where's your backup? Oh, that doesn't work. We need to change it. We need to get a different vendor. We need to get these things in place. And
Yeah.
this was early, right?
It was like it was a lens for them to view what's happening in their environment. It was very useful. It was a means to an end, right?
And they got it. And actually, I'll tell the story at the end here in a minute. But on the other side, you had this very large, very successful one. And they genuinely looked at me and said, Matt, I understand that this is a requirement. How long can I lie about it?
Yep.
Genuinely, how long can I lie about it? That was the actual question.
And
asked.
to be fair, being a filthy MBA grad, just like everybody else, business is about taking risks. Business is about taking risks. And if you can take a bigger risk, then you're going to get a bigger reward.
Amen.
And you've got some fundamental gaps between what the government assumes a business is going to do and what, at the end of the day, is just good business.
And that gap is profit. Right? Yeah. I think that gap is more profit in their mind.
There's no blame. There's no finger pointing. That's just the way. Yeah. That's just the game we're in.
Now, here's the interesting part. As you started seeing 800-171 become part of rate readiness reviews, as you started seeing these contractors, the primes and secondary primes, coming down and talking to these end contractors that were of some merit and size, they were starting to suss out that security posture in their rate readiness review. Now, they're in the same boat. They still have to make that part. They still like this supplier. They've already worked it out with them. They've got a good contract. They have the price. They know what they're building. So when you have this perivity of contract problem where nobody's inspecting up here, they're getting rewarded for not inspecting. They're getting rewarded for not doing it. You kind of see this interesting place. But it started to work where as the C's of CMMC, DFAR's interim ruling came in play in I think that was the 2019 or 2020.
Yeah, the rule would have been, they started,
whatever that
CMMC really started making a lot of noise in 2019. Got captured.
It was mainly when the Spurs capability or SPRS.
Yeah, that was all the end of 2020. Yeah, and then we've been.
That's right. It was December 2020.
Yeah, then we've been in purgatory since. So.
We have, living in sin as well. But the point is, like, when that happened, the one over here that had leaned in, that was really far up. He had a pretty decent Spurs score. He had a pretty decent operation. It was easy to see. Started getting more contracts. Started getting more and more. And I know there's not many stories of this reward where it didn't play out to take this risk for those extra 2, 3, 4, 5 years. This guy was spending extra money. This guy was taking lower margins. This guy was doing worse, presumably. He was more secure, had less interruption to his business, had less challenges, had less things that had to incident and let people know. And so it was I think there's reward in leaning in early, but to your point, as a businessman, if you're looking at this and you're asking from a raw MBA perspective, the answer is,
get it.
How long can I get away with it?
I get it. And that's sort of the fundamental trap in the specific world of CMMC, which I was talking about yesterday, is the CMMC program is just there to verify that these previous requirements
have been around a long time.
That they were implemented.
People have been checking on.
And as it's not as fast as we would like it, but as NIST revises and expands that catalog of controls to meet different threats, to provide better assurance, that catalog will continue to get bigger, which means the longer you wait, the longer it will take you to implement. So basically the conversation that I've been having with
the worse you will be at it because you haven't practiced.
Exactly. And so as I've been telling people this conversation, you've got this horrible conundrum where it's not technically required for you to do it until it's required for you to do it. But if you don't implement those
the ramp is too tall.
But if you don't implement those requirements in the 12 to 18 months before, then you're going to be 12 to 18 months behind. And so now you're having to get back to that idea of bringing all these disciplines together. You're having to make a business case for a thing that makes no business sense. And I find it a very interesting problem. I mean, there's obviously it's a good mission. It means a lot in the defense space, but just from a security guy perspective, it's a difficult needle to thread. And that's what makes me so interested in it.
Me too. I think it's the precision of it. It's the challenge of it.
It's not that I love compliance or anything in particular. I just find it to be, it's just like any other technical problem where you're like, why is this working that way? Like when I turn this upside down, why is this thing like that?
That's the engineering.
And when you turn, when you turn this like regulatory compliance thing upside down, you're like, why is it so hard?
It's just another system.
It's just another system, man.
100%.
It's just another system. It's got its own vulnerabilities that can be exploited. It's the same thought process.
I'm scoping my CUI only down to this tiny little place. So that's
and like we were talking about, I know that the defense space,
all right, controlled unclassified information. Sorry, CUI. The way I say it. Anyway.
Yeah, they apparently there's a raging debate inside
about CUI versus CUI.
Yeah, half the DoD hates that they say CUI.
Yeah,
and half of them are like, you have to say CUI, and you can see the having watched this space for a while, you can see the personal vendettas.
So funny
because some DoD people will get out there and they'll go cooey, and you can tell like at the
he's
Pentagon,
popping the guy behind him.
No,
No,
don't say it.
so
You said it wrong. So, but
I say process and process
Yeah.
too. So like, I'm already wishy-washy.
So it's one of those things where even if it's like it's like a defense DoD CMMC compliance thing. It's like we talked about, the way that, in my opinion, the way that the winds are blowing is the government more and more is realizing that they're going to have to regulate in some way, and it's not an ideal solution. And when they do that, in my opinion, the intersection of regulation, the business, and technical security all converge on this obscure world of security controls.
Yep.
And it has been under addressed, and it hasn't been very interesting. It's been the Hufflepuff of security for years. And so I just find it to be so fascinating, because it's like if you were a COBOL developer,
Sure.
and then all of a sudden everyone realized that we're going to Mars on the back of COBOL.
Sure.
Suddenly,
Which is still pretty accurate.
it's not inaccurate.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's like, well, we should probably just learn COBOL, right? And like figure out how we're going to do this. And I just find it so fascinating, because this world of NIST controls, people hate it, man. They're like, what? I don't want anything to do with it. And it's just such an interesting puzzle to me.
Well, when you talk about like common controls, right? So common controls, as I understood through your definition, which is this thing of, let's say I'm on a military base, and one of the controls says I have to have physical security. Well, that's pretty much going to be a responsibility of the physical base, because that's what their job is. That's that common control applying down to me from them.
This is the NIST. This would be the NIST parlance, right? A common control would be something that someone else does entirely,
but it
that
benefits
I
you.
inherit from them. Like I've completely outsourced 100%.
And I went to that for a reason. And the reason I wanted to put that lens in your head is, when you think about the natty stratty, which I am going to use, if you think about natty stratty, talking about moving some of the shared responsibility up to the vendor, up to the you and me and the service provider side, up to the software creator, secure by design, secure by default. You start hearing these things drive that up stack. Do those become common controls that make this easier for a lot of people to consume? Not fully, but in the concept.
Well, in theory, yes. And so, the whole idea of a shared responsibility matrix comes from, cloud models, right? Where there are sometimes people will say like the pizza model, where if I take
pizza as a service,
if I take a ready to bake, pizza as a service model, exactly the same idea. It gets a little blurrier whenever you apply it to the world of MSPs, but it's still the same concept. And I just was listening to the CISA keynote here this morning, and you read the natty stratty, you listen to what CISA has to say, and I don't know. Yes, it would be wonderful if that would happen. However, even the natty stratty will say the market does not do this on its own.
Nope.
It is a market failure. And then you get to the end of the strategy and they say, what's the big idea? We're going to ask the market nicely to stop doing what the market does. And I just don't understand how they're going to make it do the thing that they have made out to say it does not do inherently. And that just makes me feel like they're, at the end of the day, it might be 6 months, 12 months, might be a little while from now, but after a while, the government is just going to stay backed in this corner, and they're going to have to force the issue.
I've been using this corollary on stage for the last probably 2 or 3, 4 months. But one of the things that I make a corollary for us in this world that we're going through is to the automotive industry.
Yeah.
I put up on the stage 1885, 1950, 1965, 1966, and ask people, what do these dates mean? And people don't know. But the answer is, first car was made in the 1880s. First seatbelt, 1950.
In the history of the seatbelt debate.
Ralph Nader's unsafe at any speed.
I actually take issue.
All of that.
I actually take a little bit of an issue. Sometimes Jen Easterly, big fan, director of CISA, she will use the metaphor of safety measures in cars.
Okay.
But we tend to gloss over the very contentious, decades-long history of how much people fought.
That's exactly my point.
Against doing that.
Ralph Nader was like, Phyllis Lee tells it well. She's like, Ralph Nader was thinking people were trying to chase him and kill him because they were chasing him and trying to kill him.
There were Supreme Court debates and regulatory debates. Meanwhile, there are hundreds of thousands of people dying
Yeah.
every year, and
And-
everyone's like, we really don't know if we want to do this.
Our dollars are dying.
man,
We're in the trillions of
oh
loss.
yeah,
Right. And I think that's the corollary is we're in that period where it's all the fighting, it's all the
Yeah.
pushback. The market can't bear it. Guess what? I can go buy a Toyota, a Benz, a BMW, or at this
Well-
point, and they will all have the same safety measures.
Yeah.
They'll all have the
that
same
now
overall.
it is one of those things where I totally agree, right? That the market, without having been forced, would probably not have seen those things emerge. However,
as quickly.
yeah, as quickly. However, the looking back on where we are now versus before you had those things, there is a lot of very intense debate. There's a lot of politicization. There's a lot
True.
of issues that come out, and I feel like like we talked about earlier, that's probably the path that we're heading down in the same way. In my small way, right? I feel like if you believe that this wave of regulation is the way that things are going, and the language under the hood of those regulations are going to be security controls,
Yes.
then we're probably just going to have to work on trying to make those as good as possible, because you're not going to get away from them, right? And that's the problem that fundamentally I think I find very interesting.
The
that I've
other
been
piece I
working
think people gloss over is there's an entire industry of safety testing labs for cars now.
Man.
There's an entire, so the market does bear it.
Yeah.
It just shifts it, and some people
Well,
lose.
I mean, how hard is it to start a new car company?
it's really tough.
You can't.
You
right?
cannot.
You
It's
can't.
very tough.
And that's the trade-off. And this is the thing that I find, we're getting kind of philosophical here.
yeah.
But
I
this
love
is,
it though.
This is the thing where it's like, we hear this a lot in the CMMC space, right?
Yep.
Where people will say, listen, you are imposing minimum standards, and that's a barrier to entry. And the
Yes.
government, if you dig into their rulemaking explanations, they go, yep.
Yes.
But the
It's
government
that
makes
simple.
regulations. They are barriers. And so, but you've got this debate, and
I can't just go plop in a surgical room and go, hand me a scalpel, boy. Let's do us an
and
appendectomy. Right? There's barriers to entry.
Yeah,
This isn't new
so
concept.
If we were on the Oregon Trail, I'd let you operate.
You know
But,
what?
if
Dysentery, we're not going there, though. I'm not helping you with dysentery. You got to hang out.
No,
in the
if
river.
I break my foot, you're going to leave me on the trail. If I
Well, maybe. The foot we can handle. It's
a
the poop thing
pistol
that's
and
a
some
problem.
jerky, and they're like,
Carry an extra bullet for
good
that
luck.
last minute,
Yeah,
right?
good luck. But it's I find it to just be very interesting where, it's very easy and it's important for people to be heads down in some deep technical problems, but more and more, I think we're seeing in various sectors and various efforts, we're all coming to the realization that you can only ask the market to do stuff on its own for so long, and the options that are available for fixing that gap are not that great.
Yeah.
And so there's just going to be a lot of hard, boring work that has to get done to try to make it as nice as possible.
Yep.
But it's, we're trying to polish a turd here. I mean, and it's just,
You heard it here, folks.
it's just there's not
Yeah.
there's just not an easy way to do it. The best example I would give, I think we're probably
You're
running
right at Joel's time, but I'll
Yeah.
apologize to him here in just a sec.
Yeah,
In fact,
best-
Joel, join me right here.
the
buddy.
best
Join
example
in.
that I would give too is like people like we were talking about, they sort of shy away from the details of things like NIST controls,
Yep.
but then we end up with control frameworks that are very nebulous.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it's just like
We talked about this for an hour yesterday,
yeah,
right?
and
Like
you can
100%.
only go so far into these more and more nebulous frameworks before you come back around to
because you're trying to be so encompassing
Yeah.
and so broad to teach
Yeah.
you to be a practitioner. You then come back to that snapback of
Yeah.
check this configuration,
So, yep.
do that, right?
It all
that
comes
kind of
back
thing.
around. So we got to lean into those details. And then we got to, we need as many people who, if you find it curious, if you find it interesting, reach out, and we need
Yeah.
all the help we can get. So
yeah, more soldiers on the field, brother. Thank you so much.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
good seeing you.
Yep. Hey,
Appreciate
I'll see you,
you.
man.
Jacob, I always appreciate the education.
Yeah, definitely.
So for anybody still hanging out, you have at least proven that we can talk for more than a few hours in cybersecurity. So here we find ourselves. But Jacob Horn's awesome. He's been evangelizing for this in a way that was prescient for quite a while, and I've learned so much from him, as I always do. So great conversation, Joel. I hate to put you behind Jacob Horn. So
Yesterday I was we were introducing some of the speakers and stuff, and I had to do it
Yeah.
right in front of Jacob too. So, I mean,
at least you didn't call him Jason, right? You did.
I was so nervous. I thought I did, right? So, but I'm amongst the giants here in the industry, so
I
appreciate
suppose. Listen, brother, it's great to have you here. I got some dope Nikes from you that say three clicks. You've got a shirt on that says 3 clicks, and I don't like to do product evangelism much, but one of the things that I loved about working with y'all, for people that still don't know, I do a little bit of industry advisory, and I was still working for Iconic at the time. And I came to you and said, hey man, listen, I have another product that competes with you that they've helped me solve this. I created something with them as an advisor, and I think this is possible. I think you can do it where instead of me having to configure a spam filter, instead of me having to go make all these holes open to myself, I'm simply going to inject the mail directly in with direct mail injection capabilities, right? And I think that's what leads towards some of that 3 clicks is now it's easy. And what did I say? I said, you have to make this easy for people.
Yeah.
If you can make the easy button, they'll buy a product that isn't as mature because it's easy and integratable. It goes back to that 4th domain I was talking about earlier with a few other guests today. But, that was one of the things where you came back within, I think, a few weeks or months. Maybe I saw you at the next show and you said, hey, Matt, we did it. It works. Yeah. So that was really cool for me personally to be able to influence. And all I want is others to be successful. Right? I just want to solve this problem. And so it was very awesome to be able to work with your
You've
team.
played a meaningful role in our success, and I really appreciate that. That conversation, I won't forget it, because when we fast forward, Kevin, who is our CTO and product manager.
Yeah, his eyes were like a starry kid when he came to the but anyway, sorry, yeah.
And he just comes to me after that conversation. I remember we got off the phone. He's like, all right, let me think about this. And at first he's like, I don't know if it can work exactly like this and that. And then when fast forward however it was, a few weeks or a month or something, and he's like, hey, the other thing that Matt had talked about, like, we got it done. I figured it
awesome.
out. And I was like, the thing that you weren't sure if we were really able to nail? He's like, yeah, we got it done. I go, cool. Well, we're channel only now. And that was December.
Yeah, because that's right. You had been in enterprise to some extent. Yeah.
December of 2020 is we made that decision. So it started January 1st of 2021. We went exclusively channel, because the problem that you highlighted and you helped us fix is...
and that's why I stand by this not being a plug, damn it. This is exactly about interoperability. So I apologize. We'll go on there.
But the problem that you helped us fix was so key to the biggest challenge that MSPs actually face in providing security awareness training. And so, it's been very meaningful. So
that's awesome.
I like that I get to be here again to
that's
thank
awesome,
you.
Man.
I sing your praises all the time.
I know. And I now have some dope Nikes as well that I can show off as my experience for that.
Shoes.
One of the coolest parts about that is we're talking about a maturing MSP now being responsible for more. Right, they're now having to take on this pivot and metamorphosis into everything Jacob just talked about from the perspective of compliance and security delivery and operations, which I'm going to bring in my good friend Paul here in a bit to talk about some of that. But when you think about it, this is that piece where as that's being more demanded, then the interoperability, that lens 4 that I talked about, is how deeply integrated is it? How well can I scale this? How quickly can I deploy this? How effective is it upon deployment easily? And when you start talking about a lot of those things, that's really what it's going to take for us to be successful in security. And so I think that's what I was, I guess, wanting to highlight is, have you seen more demand for integration and more demand from the channel for that kind of depth of play, that it just functions and I can track it and I have, those kind of things. Have you seen a growth in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just even some vendors who we didn't previously have relationships with this week have come over to us and like, hey, what can we plug in? What are your API capabilities currently?
Yeah.
Where can we start bringing some of that in? Now, I think there's still some more maturity that's got to happen, sort of on the vendor space, even just to be able to ingest it and produce it. So that it's useful.
It's kind of the whole theme of this stream. So 100%.
So that stuff's useful, but we're absolutely. I mean, we're moving in that direction. We want to be. We want to be as engaged with the other vendors as possible. There's a whole lot of vendors who are doing what I just broadly say are the ones and zeros of security.
Sure.
But we've got this small piece, of doing the human centric, and it's now becoming more and more and more deeply ingrained with the understanding that it's key for any kind of actual security.
Well, we talked about this earlier with someone, one of the earlier guests, but identity is key, right? And when you really get down to it, we're trying to protect the humans. We're trying to protect the data. We're trying to make sure it's the right confidentiality, integrity, and availability of someone touching that. And so I have to imagine training is probably one of those most effective methods of doing that. If we're talking about the human and protecting the human, doesn't it make sense to educate the human on how to protect said human, right? And so I think, we're seeing a big growth in that. We're seeing a big growth in efficacy of training. one of the things I'd tackle with you is, there's a lot of training companies out there. Everybody provides it. Everybody has phishing training. Everybody has those things. How do you set yourself apart in that world as a vendor in security training? And I don't mean this to be aggrandizing. I'm just, what are the challenge points? What do you have to do? Is it the body of knowledge? Is it the type of video quality? Is it the engagement methodologies? Like, what are some of the biggest challenges for being an effective, security training provider?
If I were sitting here saying that we're, in the enterprise space, I'd have one answer. I think
that's key.
Yeah, when we're focused exclusively on the MSPs and selling into the SMB space, it does look a little bit different. And the key elements so far still are the ease of delivery and consistency of the platform. And I say that because one of the key things that we continue to hear about now are inconsistencies with user management within a platform. And fast forward 6 months, and one of those new people who was hired 10,
they haven't been getting training. I didn't add them in, and
then the insurance provider takes a look at it, and then you got some subrogation risks and things like that, which are getting more and more highlighted by some of the other great
I'm
players
screaming
in the
industry.
and so those are still some of the key things. We're going to move into in time some more concerns over the efficacy and quality of content, I think, and that'll let people shine in different ways.
I think that's the point I wanted to suss out, right? It really is this efficacy, right? If you read Control 14 and CIS and you start talking about all this underlying safeguards and overview, it goes on and on and on to say that is effective. Train people so that they can reduce risk. Train people so that they can recognize threats. Train people come a space.
We're not shouting into the void.
Yeah, we're not just saying teach and they don't have to learn it. We're saying they have to be efficacious in their understanding and application of it. And I think that's the gap. That is the biggest gap of, I said this with Jacob earlier, there's no other industry where I'm having to train people something they don't want to learn and have them understand it because it is the most critical aspect of their business, right? Like, and it'd be like when you have lotto or lockout tags, right? Lockout, tag out type stuff in the physical construction world. Like, people didn't want to learn it, but you have to teach them. They have to follow it. There's stringent requirements. They have to do that because it affects human life. We don't get that same understanding when it's digital, right? We don't get that same thing of, I can see somebody chewed up by that concrete mixer. We probably should lock it out when we're working on it, right? Like,
absolutely.
So you don't get that with security. So how do you make efficacy of security training, right? You can't just have all the data. You have to have a great way to deliver it, right?
So, this is the part that I love to get into. I mean, my background hasn't been in security. I came around this from the behavioral science realm.
Sure.
And that is where we really try to attack this problem. And I think more and more people are kind of getting aware of that it is a behavioral issue. We have to share the knowledge and we have a great body of knowledge that we know that
we have to get the culture there. We have to get the people's desire and why there.
Yeah.
Right?
And when you use the analogy of the seatbelt beforehand, and that's a very visual thing people can understand. Like, hey, look, let me show you a crash test with and without.
Right. I can show the head bouncing off the dash or not bouncing off the dash.
Right, like you start show somebody some logs when
see this one. This is no seatbelt. This is where what happens there. Look at that extra log. So bad. Yeah.
And so. So that's where we get to turn back to what I think is super fun. And we even spent time with research at University of Florida with psychology. And
I won't hold it against you. I'm a Florida State fan, so it's
all right,
okay.
man.
That's all right.
We've not been we've not looked so good in a little while.
Yeah, nor us. It's okay. It's been some bad years.
But that's what becomes so fun. I believe is because we're really trying to engage their brains in ways that to help them learn the thing that they don't really want to learn.
Sure,
but we all know that it's
in the 37 seconds you have their attention during the thing that they're drudging and been ignoring in their email for the last 3 weeks. Yeah,
that is absolutely it.
Yeah. And I think that's why experiential learning is valuable in those things. And I there's a concept that's kicked around called social proof. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And maybe even debunk it here in a minute. But, this concept of saying if I dropped off a human that speaks English in another place that speaks English with no knowledge of their overall, what they do, how they behave as humans, as a society, that pretty rapidly people will assimilate to what society is doing. That's essentially kind of me bastardizing the concept of this. But the point is, if you think about that, in training, I see it often fail because we, instead of enforcing what the normalcy is, which should be not clicking the link, the ones that did succeed, the 80% that did not blow up the link when I sent it to them, we focus on the people that failed. We focus on well, you didn't succeed. How can I get you to be better? well, why not just praise the ones that succeeded and not berate the ones that failed? And
Yep.
it'll make them want to go more towards that praise, right? You don't beat a dog into being a good dog ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like,
that one of the key things that we've found is that a flashing red light and a siren and all of that actually shuts everybody down.
Sure.
Like we don't learn very well in a punitive setting.
right.
And,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
when you're fearful that it just
Looking at you
doesn't
Catholic
hit home.
nuns at Catholic high school. I digress. Sorry, this come back full circle. That touches me a little bit. Yeah. No, but absolutely, man.
But so we love kind of exploring how do you actually make those differences. There's a lot of things to do from the world of behavioral science, and to your point on social proof, that is very meaningful. But to kind of loop back, even some of the conversation that you were just having with Jacob, is that the push from the top is becoming more important and louder, and that a lot of times these companies,
top being executive,
the executives, right? So
you.
that may not be the point of contact for the MSP. The MSP's
Right.
relationship with somebody in IT who's like,
Sure.
we need security awareness training, let's push it out. But then in the executive office, they're like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to click on these things.
Yeah.
Until they say, well, you're going to lose your contract.
Oh, well, now we need to deal with this. It's point of business, right? Like, I think you
And
hit the nail on the
the
head.
about face is so intense. We just had that with one of our clients.
That's
just
awesome.
recently. Yeah.
Well, but even then, the about face is only once I really have to do that for the contract.
It becomes
Right?
it has to hit. A
It's
pain
not the
point.
early
Yeah.
point. It's the
Right.
no, they're really going to take this contract
It's
from
gonna
me
be that
now.
fever
I need to
pitch.
do these things. And I
Yeah.
think even to Jacob's point, sure, with security awareness training, 3 clicks, no pun intended, you can get it done. But when you start getting into all of the nuance of collection of evidence, all the nuance of ensuring that it's done, all the nuance of breadth and understanding the security things I need to understand, it is definitely daunting. And if you're not doing it now before the contract is pulled, you have a really hard time making that turn.
Yeah.
Where something like what you're talking about, they can implement pretty quickly, and then they're on board in that regard. But
You know it better than I do in the MSP space. There's got to be clarity and ease, and then at the end of the day, it's got to be wrapped up with some good reporting so that they actually understand. If it's not reported, it didn't happen. One of your
APIs and reports, right? Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, control plane and reporting and governance plane. So absolutely, man. Listen, we're right at the end of your time. I don't want to steal from Paul's time back there, but are you coming to Beyond? How was ITNation Secure?
ITNation Secure has been great.
Has it?
Unfortunately, we're not at Beyond. We've got some team who's going to be out at the Evolve Service
Okay.
Peer Group.
Awesome.
Overlapping that, we've got several people, some friends out.
Sometimes I like to just poke.
Yeah,
Sorry about that, bro. I still
friends
love
out at with your crew at PAX 8. But I know it's going to be a great event. Like you got a phenomenal team, and it's the opener. So it's sad to not be there with you guys, but.
Well, you know what, brother? Always there in my heart. I appreciate you being here.
Man, thank you.
I love to watch your success keep growing. And I'm sorry you got sucked into the channel from the enterprise place, but it's a beautiful home
Hey,
to be.
I love this. And we'll always be singing your praise. I
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it,
See you,
Thank
brother. Thanks for coming by. Mr. Anderson, I presume. I'm
How
sure
are
you've never heard that joke made
No,
before.
that's the first.
That's the first one? I'm that creative?
You are the first.
Man, I thought so. I was hoping that was the case.
So I'm remiss. I'm wearing Nova Coast, not pillars.
You know what, though?
So I bought you some pillars.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So
Thank you.
there you go.
Actually, those are pretty dope. I
There you
will
go.
wear those. Thank you.
Kind of old school.
I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a kind of Argyle. If you
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think makes you perfect for this conversation is Nova Coast versus Pillar. I think that is probably one of the more telling understandings of what the SMB is going through today. What I mean by that is you come from a world that enterprise was already forced to do these things. You've been doing IAM and PAM and all kinds of work for enterprises in a scoped and understood business fashion. I mean, I'm maybe summarizing.
Right.
But now you're coming down, and one of the things Pillar has had to overcome is a little bit of a lack of maturity in our world to understand what you even do or bring, right, to the SMB market.
Yeah, it's a lack of. Well, I don't like to say lack of maturity. It's a not a focus on that security maturity, right? They
Right.
have focuses on other.
That's fair.
metrics.
They're very, very mature at a lot of
Right.
other things.
Exactly. Some things
Efficacy,
way more-
efficiency,
Right.
delivering a good client experience, onboard. I mean, all of those things.
Right. To your point, though, we grew up in the highly regulated space where security was not.
Wasn't negotiable.
Right. You're
Not-
doing
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
So 27 years ago, started down this path, and then 5 years ago, through PAX 8, got brought into the SOC as a service is the generic term, but a platform so that we can bring what we do in that security maturity, what we
Knowledge
learned
you
in
have,
enterprise,
deep scalability
bring it
you have.
down. And it's been a huge learning experience for us as well.
I'll tell a story. I was in that first beta. I was a customer. I was at
I'm
ITNation.
sorry about that.
and I say this because Adam Gray, who I'm going to have on stage at the Beyond next week and have some really cool conversations. He's brilliant human.
Yes.
But he was
different
very unaware of how ignorant I was, and almost in some ways offended, going from a space where people are aware, you're talking with real professionals, to Matt. This is 5 years ago, not understanding security in the same way, not understanding the things, and in some ways trivializing a lot of what was being done there with ignorant questions. And I say that to point at myself, saying everyone's going through that, right? Everyone's going through to your point, their security maturity parallel, right? They're growing that knowledge. Are you seeing better questions today from that community in people taking SOC as a service than you were 5 years ago when I was asking dumb questions?
Yes and no. And you weren't asking dumb questions. There aren't any dumb questions. There's just questions with lack of background
and context.
Right? Yeah, context. So no. So yes, to your question, we are getting better questions, but there's still big gaps.
Yeah.
And I think we are in a unique position that we get a lot of different viewpoints of security. So we have Nova Coast proper, which deals with highly regulated, big global banks and healthcare, blah blah blah. We have Nova Coast Federal, which is we're doing some amazing
back to Jacob
projects.
Horn stuff, right?
Yeah.
This very regulatory body.
That's a very different view of security. It's not better or worse. It's just different
context.
Right? And if you grew up, I do hear a lot of the vendors who they're the former NSA and they kind of grew up in that world.
Yep.
That's a different world. Those machines are much more hygienic than you would find on the same Windows machine.
One would hope.
They are. They're just more generically locked down. So your view of security is different. Not better or worse. So having that perspective of kind of all the different ways that you can kind of grow up in security, and now you've got to apply what you've learned to, in our case, to this MSP world and the SMB space. It's been a big learning curve, but teaching the MSPs the right questions to ask has been a focal point of ours. And I've heard it. I've listened to most of the show today, other than when I was riding the elevator, and the common theme is education.
It is, isn't it?
It is, and it's tough.
And empowerment in some ways, right?
And the realization that any vendor that's telling you, here's the panacea, the tool that's going to...
Yeah, you're pulling my string on this one, brother.
No,
you guys don't do it. Never.
No, it's people, process, and tools that make you more efficient.
Yeah.
And expand.
And allow me to bring in a scale of knowledge, a scale of capabilities, a scale of those things.
Right.
One of the things that I have beef about with CIS version 8 and 10.1 specifically, 10.2 specifically, is when they talk about the need for an EDR and they talk about the need to have this endpoint detection and response, they make an assumption that the user knows how to use that tool, that they have the capability of scale, that they have the people in-house. They don't speak towards the need for knowledge scale and knowledge escapement. They were catering to an enterprise world that had that capability. It was understood that if I have this, I have that capability, or they should be.
None of the capability, but just the volume of people.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, the sheer volume of that scale.
Right.
And to deal with all the alerts and to deal with the false positives and to make rules to find new threats and to do all the things that you need to do. And it's a real cry for outsourcing, right? And I think that's one of the things that's the gap in CIS 8 that could be solved in 8.1 and further iterations of speaking towards that skills capability gap and scale capability gap. Right. It's the only way you're going to be able to scale down to a security of one. Right, where one human is able to be protected in the same way as 1,000. And I think that was your premise coming into this was, can we take all of this that we do in our scale and operations and obviously make money? Like, profit's good.
It is good, but it's not
bring
the
it down to that
point.
scale.
It really isn't. I mean, we live in the enterprise space, and I'm not trying to pretend like we're Robin Hood.
Sure.
We need to make money.
Yeah, everybody has
to.
But
it isn't the focus of our offering in the MSP space.
So this is serving a mission in that regard.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And
similar mission to mine, you might say. That's why we're such
aligned.
Good friends.
We walk down the same path.
Yeah.
But on our side, the interesting thing is it is a people problem at our scale. And one of the other brands that we have.
Help me understand that a little more. Unpack that a little bit more. What do you mean by it being a people problem even at your scale?
There's a lack of people in the industry.
There you go.
Right. So we have to find people that aren't ready to work. We have to find people that are capable to work and then train them on the tools, the process, the procedures.
So it's back to education?
Back to education. But So the thing I just want to throw on the table, because I don't know if you're aware of it, but we have this other brand called Apex.
Okay.
The focus of Apex initially, when we moved to Wichita, we moved our corporate headquarters last year. We got exposed to a company called Envision,
Okay.
and they enabled the blind and visually impaired community.
Okay.
So because in our SOCs, I don't know if Adam's talked to you about this, but we front end any vendor's tool that we run in our SOC that we manage for our customers, we front end that with a browser, right?
Sure.
So we never just natively give the tool to the SOC analyst.
Yeah.
Well, because we have that browser interface laying on the top, which we do for reasons so that we can track and
All
and
kinds
help
of things.
analysts.
Also, surface contextual information the way it needs to be. All those things.
Yes.
But yeah.
But we also were inadvertently capable of making all those tool sets available to blind and visually impaired
That's
people.
freaking cool.
So now we're starting to hire those people, both Nova Coast Federal, Pillar, all of our brands, and it's tapping into this horribly underserved community
Sure.
of, I think the unemployment rate in the BVI community
It's probably
is
high.
It's like 7%.
Yeah, it's really tough to do jobs that take any type of tactile understanding of your physical space. I also have one eye, so I'm lucky I get to do YouTube type stuff, right?
But
I
it's-
digress.
It's a huge,
Not to make light of it. I'm sorry. I hope that's not taken
no.
that way, but yeah.
Make light of everything. If you
Yeah.
can't make light of it, it's not worth doing it. But now we've tapped into this pool, and any pool of people that you group together, some percentage of them are brilliant.
Yeah,
They just
sure.
haven't had the accessibility to the tools.
Right.
We
So you've built some really cool SOC analysts out of that.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty cool. I'd love to see what that 3 and 5 year picture looks like for you as that continues forward. Right?
It's just
That-
huge growth.
Yeah, yeah.
So now we're opening our SOC in Shannon, Ireland. We've got Manchester, UK, and we've got
Have
3
you,
in
have
the
you seen
US.
any movement towards neurodiversity as well in that same space of being in neurodiverse types for serving
I
that?
hear
SOC
talk
field?
about it. We haven't dove deep into
Sure.
that yet, but it's it's
I
on
know
the
of a few
horizon.
YouTubers that are very big on the neurodiversity in that space, in the security analyst space specifically. Like just the way the brain works for some of those things is very interesting.
Right.
But sorry, a
So-
little tangential.
No, but on that tangential spectrum, and it wasn't something we sought out to do, but we found people that are somewhere on the spectrum actually make really good SOC analysts. The focus
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
So-
and the ability of large system sets, and sometimes in that
Yeah.
way of being able to do it. So,
Yeah.
one of the things that we got 5 minutes left. You're going to be at Beyond. You're a diamond sponsor. Thank you very much. We hope to make this a
So
success.
excited.
Yeah, I'm beyond giddy. I'm excited about it.
And
it's
I
gonna
made
be
the
fun.
smart move. Adam will be the face of Pillar,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
me.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I have a face made for radio. I'm not.
Well, we're
I'm not getting
unfortunately
this-
on.
I
This is,
was hoping to. Yeah.
yeah, I can't block it completely, brother. I'm sorry. No, I love you, man. And Adam will be great. We're going to be doing a keynote panel, and I don't think he's actually even heard the questions yet. But basically,
No.
I'm going to be asking things around this shift to a mature buying, consumer buying for reasons and technical reasons, not marketing flash. Right?
Right.
It's hard to be marketing flash of your SOC. A SOC and everything. I'll analyze all the things and come to the great. Like it's fantastic. But as you see people buying based on data, you now see where, oh, that's a log aggregator. Oh, that's my SOC as a service. Oh, that's my SIM. Oh, that's my. And how does that change the world of sales when you're now selling to an educated consumer compared to a uneducated consumer? And I don't mean that in a negative way, just kind of where we are.
I don't know if it changes that much. So again, coming from the world that we came through from, one of the things we realized is that you do have to brag a little bit about the stuff that you do and you find. So I talked to Adam
Sure.
yesterday. Starting next Friday, we're going to start publishing. Here's all the bad stuff we found
Sure.
this week.
Yeah,
Because the other players in the space are doing that, and we just didn't think in
Well,
that.
I think in
regard.
your own way, you actually just said what I'm saying here. You have to give the data. You have to show
Yes.
the work. You have to show the proof. You have to show the data. Even if it's
Right.
braggadocious a little bit,
Right.
you have to be able to prove that you're doing these things. And I think that is a byproduct of a maturing consumer
Agreed.
in my mind. So,
Right.
yeah, because before you wouldn't have had to. You could
I
have
would
just
never
said,
have done
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also coming from your space, you almost had a captioned market to some extent, right? Like when you're dealing with federal or when you're dealing with the corporate space, you have at least a informed and consuming buyer that's trying to sort out which vendor makes the most
Yes, and
sense.
you already had to prove yourself just to sit at the table.
Yes,
Just to give a proposal.
true story, and that's not
Which
the
is
case
very
in
different
SMB.
here. No,
that's not the
It's
case.
just-
Yeah, that's a
ran
great
into
call out.
I ran into an MSP 6 months ago, and I was asking him, "How do you vet the vendors that you?"
Yeah.
and he said, "Well, I see which ones show up at the trade show." And I said,
Whew,
"You
that
realize
just means they spent marketing dollars.
they just paid for a booth?"
Yeah.
And he said, "No, they're vetted." I said,
No, that's not
they're
how this
not."
functions. Yeah.
So I
No,
was
they're
like,
vetted
"Oh
by the
my
dollar.
gosh, right, exactly.
I mean, granted, I would imagine that IT Nation is not going to take just anybody without any level of efficacy or understanding what they do. But that said, pretty much. I mean, it is kind of that way. In fact, that's one of the things I think I've been so happy about with Beyond. I'm not saying we've vetted all the products and done those things. We have definitely been more discerning of who we want there, right? And have definitely chosen that path of, and I say we, the smart people that made those choices,
would
not
agree.
me.
I would agree.
But try to be, in that
Right.
regard, right? And I think you were an early player in the market, and it's hard to be an early player in the market. It's good your mission was your mission, not the direct profitability of said, right? It wasn't this funding challenge. But I've always enjoyed working with you. It's fun chasing you around the world and showing up in various places together, multiple countries. And
I got to do this.
you want to do a selfie real
I
quick?
gotta do a
All right,
selfie.
let's do it.
On camera with Matt. Ready? Nice.
Awesome, brother. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, thanks for being here. I'm going to wrap this show up. I'm going to leave one last thing. Anybody still hanging on the LinkedIn side and YouTube side, this has been a fantastic conference. ITNation Secure is always so inviting to me. I've spoken at it now 4 years in a row. And, I love that we can bury any level of competitive nature for the raw education of our consumers, which drives all of our success. And I think ITNation did a great job of it this week. And I cannot wait to see how amazing our team is next week at Beyond. I'll see you and your team there and 1,000+ MSPs.
Hell yeah.
I'm excited.
All right.
So see you, brother.
Thanks, man.
I'm out.